Commission, and with me this morning are Commissioners Hughes and Kimmerite. I now call for hearing the show cause proceeding in docket number W-1075 sub 12 in the matter of application by KRJ Incorporated doing business as KRJ Utilities for authority to increase rates and for water and sewer utility service in its Southern Trace and Rockbridge subdivisions in Wake County. Before we proceed further, and as is required by the State Government Ethics Act, I remind members of the Commission of our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire at this time as to whether any member has a known conflict with respect to the matters coming before us in this docket. All right, the record will reflect that no conflicts have been identified, so we will proceed. On January 10th, 2018, KRJ Utilities filed an application with the Commission seeking authority to increase its rates and charges for water utility service in the Southern Trace subdivision and for water and sewer utility service in the Rockbridge subdivision, both of which are located in Wake County, North Carolina. On August 6th, 2018, the Commission issued an order approving stipulation with a condition, granting partial rate increase and requiring customer notice. Pursuant to that order, among other matters, KRJ was authorized to increase its rates for water utility service in Southern Trace and Rockbridge and required KRJ to decrease its monthly flat rate for sewer utility service in Rockbridge. Further, ordering paragraph 14 of the rate case order required KRJ to update the Commission on a quarterly basis concerning the status of the project to restore well 2 in Southern Trace to increase pumping capacity. KRJ was ordered to continue such quarterly reporting until the actual project completion date had been reported to the Commission. KRJ consistently filed the required quarterly reports from October 2018 until October 2022. It ceased filing the required quarterly reports thereafter and failed to file any quarterly or cumulative reports between October 2022 and November 12, 2024. On April 8th, 2024, the public staff filed a motion requesting that the Commission issue an order requiring KRJ Utilities to show cause why it should not be required to pay penalties as authorized by North Carolina General Statute Section 62-310 sub A for its violations of the rate case order. On May 2nd, 2024, the Commission issued an order directing KRJ Utilities to file a cumulative update for the delinquent reporting period within 30 days. KRJ failed to file the cumulative report as ordered by the Commission. On June 28, 2024, the Commission issued an order scheduling a show cause hearing requiring KRJ to appear before the Commission and provide a cumulative update concerning the status of the project to restore well 2 in Southern Trace. The order further directed the public staff to participate and prosecute the show cause proceeding on behalf of the using and consuming public. On September 24th, 2024, KRJ Utilities filed a motion to continue the show cause hearing. On September 27th, 2024, the Commission issued an order granting KRJ's motion to continue the hearing to October 16th, 2024. The order required KRJ to retain counsel to represent it at the show cause hearing, to meet in person with the public staff no later than October 9th, to provide an update of the status of the systems and respond to all requests for information from the public staff. The order also required that should KRJ fail to meet with the public staff by October 9th, the public staff would be required to investigate whether an emergency operator should be appointed at the KRJ service areas. On October 7th, 2024, Brady Allen filed a notice of appearance informing the Commission that he represents KRJ Utilities in this docket. On October 14th, 2024, KRJ filed a motion to continue the show cause hearing for 30 days. On October 15th, the Commission granted KRJ's motion to continue the hearing, setting the matter for hearing on November 15th, 2024. On November 12th, KRJ filed a cumulative update with the Commission, and that brings us to today. I will call upon counsel for the parties to introduce themselves for purposes of the record, and we will begin with KRJ Utilities.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell, Commissioner Hughes, and Commissioner Kimmerite. My name is Brady Allen, and I'm appearing on behalf of KRJ Utilities. With me is my co-counsel, Dwight Allen, and also at the table is Bob Stafford, who is the president of KRJ. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Allen. Public staff.
Good morning. I'm Gina Holt with the public staff here on behalf of the using and consuming public.
Good morning, Ms. Holt. All right, counsel, any preliminary matters that we need to address before we get started this morning?
No.
Okay, not hearing any. So we will go ahead and get started. And public staff, you all may proceed accordingly.
The public staff calls Charles Junis.
All right, good morning, Mr. Junis. If
Good
you
morning.
would, left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, Ms. Holt.
Please state your name, present position, and business address for the record.
Yes, my name is Charles Junis. I'm the Director of the Public Staff, Water, Sewer, Transportation, and Telephone Division. My business address is 4030 North Salisbury Street, Raleigh, North Carolina.
And please state your qualifications and duties.
Um, so I, we're kind of winging this, right? So, I am a graduate of North Carolina State University with a degree in civil engineering. I have worked for the public staff for now 11 and a half years. I worked consulting for 2 years before that. So extensive experience with water and sewer utilities. My duties with the public staff include the review of applications by water and sewer utilities before the commission and making recommendations. Also monitoring the operations of those utilities.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd like to now pass out what's been marked as Public Staff Exhibit 1.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Holt, will you make sure?
Yes.
Okay,
did.
got it. Thank you.
I gave the parties and the court report on. Mr. Junis, on, do you have Exhibit 1 before you?
Yes, I do.
And could you identify that for the record?
Yes, that's the motion of the public staff for order to show cause that was filed on April 8th, 2024.
Okay, for the record, we'll mark this exhibit as Public Staff Exhibit 1.
Thank you. Mr. Junis, on April 8th, as you just alluded to, 2024, the public staff filed a verified motion for order to show cause consisting of 5 pages, correct?
That's correct.
And was that motion verified by you?
Yes,
Stating that the facts in the motion were true and based on your personal knowledge?
that's correct.
And were 2 exhibits attached to the motion marked Public Staff Exhibits 1 and 2?
Yes.
Do you suggest any corrections be made to the motion?
No.
Okay. And are you familiar with KRJ Inc., DB, doing business as KRJ Utilities?
Yes, I have multiple years of experience with KRJ.
Chair Mitchell, I would like move that the commission take judicial notice of its order approving stipulation with a condition granting partial rate increase and requiring customer notice issued on August 6, 2018 in docket number W-1075 sub 12, which is the docket that this matter is filed in.
All right, the commission will take judicial notice of the order as requested by council.
Mr. Junis, are you familiar with the order?
Ms. Holt, if you would, just pull that microphone closer, make sure everybody can hear you. Thank you.
Mr. Junis, are you familiar with the order issued on August 6, 2018 of the commission?
Yes, I've reviewed the document and familiar with it.
Okay. Could, I'd like to refer you to page 31. The credo paragraph 14 of that order.
Yes, ma'am. That's the ordering paragraph that states that KRJ shall update the commission on a quarterly basis concerning the status of the project to restore well 2 and Southern Trace to increase pumping capacity. The first quarterly report shall be filed on or before October 15th, 2018 for the quarter ending September 30th, 2018. Such quarterly reporting shall continue until the actual project completion date has been reported by KRJ.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'd like to direct your attention back to Public Staff Exhibit 1, on page 4, paragraph 15, which states the, public staff's belief and concern. Could you address that?
Yes, so the main issue here with that reporting requirement is that well 2 had significantly reduced pumping capacity, such to the point that they are below the minimum design standard by DEQ, established by DEQ. So they are then at risk of potential outages. They're at risk of reduced pressure. And so our belief is that the company has not submitted for approval of a replacement well 4. They have not received approval of that well. In fact, it's our understanding that they have not filed for a variance for the well site with DEQ. And so we have not seen material progress, nor is the project complete to have restored the lost capacity.
Thank you. Chair Mitchell, I'd like to now pass out what has been marked as Public Staff Exhibit 2 for identification.
All right, the document will be marked for identification as Public Staff Exhibit 2.
Now, Mr. Junis, could you describe Public Staff Exhibit 2 for the record?
Yes, so this is the what the company contends to be a cumulative update that was filed on November 12th of 2024.
Have you reviewed this cumulative update?
Yes, I have.
Have you conducted an investigation of sorts on the company's update? And if so, to what extent?
Yes, approaching this with sort of the mindset of trust but verify. I have reviewed the document. I have reached out to DEQ to touch base on the accuracy of some of the information and the status of the progress that is described in this document. Just to address some of these issues kind of one by one, the decrease in production of this well is acknowledged to go back all the way to August of 2015 on page 13 of the commission's order back on August of 2018. So we are now to the point of 9 years going on 10 years of reduced pumping capacity, which then compromises the potential service provided to these customers. With regards to the progress that is described, they have identified a location of well 4, which would be very close to well 2. Well 4 has, there is a structure that's within the 100-foot radius, and so they would have to request a variance for that well site to be approved by DEQ, and they would also have to submit plans and specifications to be approved by DEQ before this well could go into service. There's also a question of how the drawdown test was conducted for well 4. When you have wells that are so closely located, if you contend to have the capacity of both wells, then it should be a simultaneous drawdown test. So both wells should operate at the same time to see if there's any influence on one or on the other. We have not seen evidence of that drawdown test and how it was conducted, but it is a concern for us. The installation date, which the company contends of March 2025, again pushes this process out even further. we stopped seeing quarterly reports in October of 22. So that's been now 2 years. Since then, we've seen little to no progress from the last update to now the cumulative update with this project of restoring the production of well 2. That is concerning to me, because that gets into not only do they not comply with the commission's order to supply those quarterly reports, but then you had a subsequent order that asked for a cumulative update at a previous date and they didn't file it. So now you've not complied with the second commission order. And then you are also not in compliance with Commission Rule R77, adequacy of facilities, because they acknowledge right here that they don't have enough well pumping capacity to meet the minimum standard. That then makes this ripe for consequences in the form of fines and penalties, all of which could be $1,000 a day. You then have well 6, which is another sort of added complexity here. It is also my understanding that that well has not been cited. I did verify that the statement that they're in the process of arranging an on-site inspection is true, and I believe that is going to happen next week with DEQ staff. However, again, that requires plans and specifications to be submitted to DEQ. It's my understanding that those have not been put together. It hasn't been designed, hasn't been put together, and hasn't been submitted to DEQ. So these timelines also come into question, because if you don't have the design, if you don't have the plans, if you don't have the specs together, well, that takes time. Then you also have time for approval by DEQ, and then you have actual construction time to interconnect these wells. So I am a bit skeptical of that timeline. Then on the update on page 3, it talks about radiological issues at well number 1. This has been an issue that's sort of been on and off again. They do have pending violations. It's my understanding they have not responded to those violations as required by DEQ. It's also my understanding that the concept of mixing the water is not a solution that DEQ is going to approve, that they are not comfortable with that approach. So unless the water quality improves naturally or they install treatment, this option that they have laid out in the update, to my understanding, based on communication with DEQ, is not a viable option. So they have had, we were supposed to have this hearing beginning of October. We're now a month and a half later. They've had an opportunity to pull their plans together. We met with them on the 9th, and we're sort of getting repeat of previous updates. And then anything new, it doesn't seem like they have vetted it with the environmental regulator and is not a viable path forward. So this is just a continued evidence of lack of progress and a lack of reaching ultimately the intended solution of adequate and quality water service to the customers of Southern Trace.
Thank you. I have no further questions. The witness is available for cross-examination.
Okay, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Just a few questions. Mr. Junis, you stated that you have multiple years of experience with KRJ. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know how long KRJ has been a utility in North Carolina?
I don't recall from the docket, but it's decades from my understanding.
Would you accept that, subject to check, it's almost 30 years, 28 years?
I'll accept that subject to check.
And how long have you been with the public staff?
Again, 11 and a half years.
Now, going to the radiological material, with your experience with KRJ, are you aware that the radiological material has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years?
Correct. I think I referred to it as an on and off problem.
It's on and off problem. That's correct. And when it has been on, it's been very close to what the maximum threshold is. Is that correct?
So you are, yes, hovering around a maximum contaminant level that at that point is a health violation. I think there is also science that supports when you are bouncing back and forth and hovering around that level that there is still a risk presented. So I would caution that.
And where do you get this science from?
So maximum contaminant levels are set based on health risks. And so then those thresholds, you're reaching a health threshold, but that does not mean that there's no risk below that level. I mean, you can look at EPA science of when they're setting the MCL, but I'm happy to provide late filed exhibits if that would satisfy you.
Are you familiar with Rod Butler, who was previously the engineer for KRJ?
Yes, I am. I've talked to Rod on multiple occasions.
Are you aware that he had a health issue in October of 2022, or thereabouts?
I am aware of that.
No further questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Junis, I want you to help me understand sort of the history on well 2. So you mentioned just a minute ago that the well's been at diminished capacity since around August 2015. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. So that's noted on page 13 of the commission's order that was dated August 6th of 2018
Okay.
in this very document.
And have there been, do you recall service quality complaints related to the diminished capacity of that well?
Yes, so that order addresses testimony by customers regarding concerns about pressure, concerns about discolored water, and the design of the system. And then I have, in recent history, received complaints and concerns about the quality of service.
Okay, so we've got the complaint or the service quality concerns that were memorialized in the rate case order.
Yep.
And then subsequent to those concerns, has the public staff received expressions of concern from customers of the Southern Trace system?
Yes, I spoke to an individual, and his name escapes me at this moment, and I apologize for that, that is associated with the homeowners association from that community. I've also spoken to another customer of that community about their concerns. The concerns range from pressure, system outages, and then the radiologicals, because you're supposed to get notices when you have an MCL violation like that. And so then when a customer gets that notice, obviously there's questions and some people have concerns about that.
Okay, so help me understand what happens when a well is at diminished capacity.
Well, at that point, at normal demand, depending on how diminished it is, you run into system pressure because you have hydro tanks that will give you some level of storage, minimal, and try to maintain pressure, but you need that ongoing pumping from the wells to replenish and provide the water to supply the system. At a diminished level you're stretching very thin. You're below the minimum design standard that we talk about of the 400 gallons per day, which is equivalent to about 0.55 gallons per minute per connection. And so you're well below standards that we're seeing for our new development, where some of our utilities require 1 or even 1.5 gallons per minute per connection. So you struggle, especially in dry periods or high usage periods, such as irrigation, to keep up. And then you can have, like I said, those diminishing pressures and also system outages. Now you combine that with then another well that has an MCL violation, and arguably that well should be shut off, taken offline. Now you're really pressed and facing inadequate service.
Okay, so just walk me through. I want to make sure I have a complete understanding of the or the utilities obligations here. So you mentioned a design standard. What design standard are you talking about, and what is that standard?
So yeah, they reference it in their update that with the addition of well 4, this is on page 2 in the second to last paragraph, where they claim that the 3 wells currently yield 90 gallons, and with the addition of well 4, the 4 wells would yield 121 gallons, which they contend would exceed the NCAC minimum requirement. And that was the 400 gallons per day per connection, or 0.55 gallons per minute per connection standard that I was talking about.
0.55?
Yeah,
Gallons
that's just a conversion of gallons
minute?
per minute per connection.
Okay.
The problem is they're a little inconsistent with the numbers they use, because they talk about the 3 wells summing to 75 gallons on page 1, and then also on page 3, the well yields you'll see in the table, new yield. You have well 1, 35, well 2, 20, well 3, 20. That's only 75. So if you're adding 75 plus 31, you're only at 106, not the 121 that they talked about on well 2. So we're a little sloppy with our numbers here. Ultimately, you take the number of connections, you can multiply it by 0.555, and you will get your number that is the minimum requirement. Ideally, you have more than the minimum requirement, or you have supplemental storage to make sure you can ensure quality service.
And so in this instance, there is supplemental storage. There are the 2 tanks at Southern Trace. And so are those tanks able to provide supplemental pressure
So
or?
you still have to be over the minimum design standard.
Okay.
Now, those can help mitigate the impacts when you are just over that minimum design standard, and that's what has helped them during this time frame of why you haven't had extended outages or extensive customer complaints. But it's a fine line to toe. And there have been instances where people are not receiving adequate service.
Okay, so thank you for all of that explanation. I understand the public staff's concern here to be that the utility was ordered by the commission in the rate case order to provide quarterly updates on the status of well 2. And in October 2022 failed to do that. Then my understanding is public staff reached out to representative of the utility, specifically to Mr. Butler in June of 23. And I believe you actually made that contact. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, so I have reached out to Mr. Butler in the past.
So you reached out to him in 23, and what did you learn in 23?
So I think our dates might be
And I'm recalling this from the motion that y'all filed.
right, and I want to make sure we have the dates right. Give me 1 second. So that was actually 22. So June of 22. So as I transitioned into my new role as director, I was checking up on some of these orders that were outstanding and the reporting requirements and the progress of things. And so in this case, we had actually received a call that prompted me to look at this closer. That's when we had reviewed some of the quarterly reports, or at least I personally reviewed the quarterly reports and reached out to Mr. Butler with a data request, asking questions about the progress or lack thereof with completing this project. And then subsequently, I was monitoring the situation. And when those quarterly reports stopped coming in, then I subsequently reached out again to Mr. Stafford. After Mr. Butler had indicated that he is no longer working for the company, I then reached out to Mr. Stafford and did not receive a reply. And then I also reached out to Mr. Johnson, who had filed the last quarterly report, not Mr. Butler. had gotten one response, but then no further response despite a representation that they would work on it.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up for me.
Yep.
Okay, so then, so my understanding is during the course of 23, you had minimal contact with Mr. Johnson. And then you all took action in 24 by filing this motion for show cause. So am I clear that throughout 2023, the only contact that you had with the utility was that contact with Mr. Johnson?
And Mr. Stafford, which is laid down in page 3 of our motion. So we tried to reach out to Mr. Stafford, didn't get a hold of him, talked to.
But so Mr. Stafford never responded to you in 23?
Never.
So the only contact that you all were able to make was with Mr. Johnson?
That's correct.
And and it was you, Chuck Junis,
Yes,
that made that
that's
contact?
correct.
Okay.
And it's laid down. It was email exchange, and you have the responses, and it's, I believe, part of the attachments, exhibit 2
Okay.
to the motion.
During that time, did you all, during the year of 23, did the public staff receive any service quality complaints from customers regarding service at either Rockbridge or Southern Trace?
I believe the conversation with the HOA representative was in 23, but I don't have those notes with me. I apologize.
Okay.
Um,
Are you aware of whether the utility was billing customers during that time?
I have no reason to believe they weren't billing.
Okay. Was the utility paying reg fee during that time?
So it's my understanding there was an issue with the financial reporting. And then that was subsequently resolved prior to this cumulative update.
Okay.
But that's commission side of the house, the financial division that deals with that. So we don't normally deal with that.
Okay, so just one more question. I just want to make sure, just confirming, the utility was not responsive to the public staff until the motion, aside from the conversation you had with Mr. Johnson, until the motion to show cause was filed?
Correct. And even then, I mean, you have the record where they weren't even responsive to the motion and the commission's order until sort of the last second.
Okay. Is it the public staff's opinion that the utility has the financial, technical, and capable or managerial capabilities to own and operate this utility?
So I think that is a question for them to answer here right after me. I will tell you based on, and I'm not an economist, but I did look at the annual report. They reported negative income losses on their 2023 annual report. They have had repeated income losses. You combine that with the compliance issues, you are creating a record that we would identify as a utility at risk. These are indicators that we would suspect are headed in the wrong direction. And if they are not prepared to come up with a real tangible plan and a way to fund it, and designs and a timeline, we do sort of have to shift our approach here. Instead of fines and trying to coax them to do what they were supposed to do, arguably 6 years or even 10 years ago, then we do have to shift our mindset to, does the commission need to utilize 6242 to order them to address these deficiencies even further? Or do we have to evaluate or ask the company when they're on the stand if they are willing to consent to an emergency operator if they are not prepared to fix these problems?
I want to ask you about well 1, but before I get there, I want to ask you about sewer service and Rockbridge. Any reason to think sewer service is not adequate?
So there was a compliance violation in the spring of this year. My understanding is that was partially associated with a lack of payment of the operator. The operator had given notice that they were going to walk off the job if they weren't paid. That issue was ultimately resolved. It is also my understanding that DEQ thinks highly of the contract operator.
Who is the
I
contract
believe
operator?
it's Mr. Wilson. Have that here. Just give me 1 second. I thought I had it here, but just flipping by it. Yeah, I believe it's,
All right, well, if it's your if it's your testimony that the environmental regulator
Yeah,
has
well-
confidence in the operator, that's all I need to know.
sorry, it's Dennis Wilson of Wilson's Water Services.
And do you have personal knowledge of Mr. Wilson and Wilson's Water Services?
I personally have not dealt with Mr. Wilson. Like I said, I've reviewed Laserfish records on the wastewater side. There are email exchanges that are on Laserfish between Mr. Wilson and Mr. Stafford regarding failure of payment and an indication that they did not feel that they were being properly supported by the owner. Now, like I said, DEQ got involved. The operator was ultimately compensated and things have improved there. But again, when you have this kind of bouncing back and forth in compliance, question marks are raised.
Is my recollection correct that there were radiological issues at Rockbridge with the water system there?
Ooh. I do not recall that off the top of my head. Our focus here has been Southern Trace.
So you're not aware of whether there was treatment installed at Rockbridge to address radiological activity? If the answer is no, that's fine.
I don't recall
Okay.
that
Okay.
from my experience. I didn't work on that rate case
Okay.
at the onset, but I have tried to catch up here.
The update indicates, let's talk about well one. The update indicates that well one, the utility considered green sand filtration for well one but has sort of landed on this mixing concept because it's more cost effective. And I understand your testimony about mixing as a solution and the uncertainty there. But let's say filtration is ultimately required here. Based on what you know about green sand filters, is my concern justified that a green sand filter spread across, the cost of a green sand filter spread across 192 customers is going to be shocking?
It's going to have a rate impact.
So not shock, but a rate impact.
I don't know what their capabilities are in terms of pricing. I would say at minimum that would cost $150,000.
Okay.
But it would go on up. How you fund it is going to impact the rate impact. I don't know how they're going to fund it. Another question for the company to answer in this show cause hearing.
Okay.
And just to note, this exceedance of the MCL, it happened in Q3 of 2020, Q4 of 2020, Q1, and Q2 of 2022. Now you've had a violation since Q1 of 24 to present. So we've had extended periods of time where that water is not safe. It's not compliant. So at some point, you can't just keep playing the waiting game of, well, maybe it'll go away for a quarter and then it come back.
Okay. Tell me what you know about current staffing of the utility. You've indicated there's a contract operator in place for the sewer system at Rockbridge. What else?
It's my understanding that Mr. Wilson operates all of these systems. Mr. Johnson is the contract sort of manager. It's my understanding Mr. Stafford is president, and then they have sort of an administrative staff. It was my understanding from the conversations that we had on the 9th that administrative staff had a period of time where they were unable to do their work. And so that was a contributing factor to the lack of payment of Mr. Wilson.
Why was the administrative staff unable to do work?
I think it was a health issue, from my understanding. The problem is, as a utility, you still have to, rain or shine, day or night, sickness and in health, you still have to provide service to customers, and you have to provide adequate service. So while I am sympathetic to extenuating circumstances and life coming at you, I can personally tell you, just this last night, I've had life come at me, but I'm here, I'm doing my job, and that's what has to happen. So either if somebody can't do it, then someone else has to step up and do it. And Mr. Stafford is ultimately responsible for that for KRJ. The evidence here is they were not reacting and doing what they were supposed to on multiple occasions. You can't point to Mr. Butler has an issue and he leaves. Mr. Johnson filed the quarterly report in October of 22. Why didn't Mr. Johnson keep filing the quarterly reports? You can't blame Mr. Butler for leaving the company for why you didn't keep doing it. And the same thing with the administrative staff. If she's not there to pay the contract operator, Mr. Stafford should have wrote the check. Like, that is unacceptable. That is not a good enough excuse for why you are not providing compliant service. Just doesn't cut it, especially when it happens repeatedly. Why are you not learning? Why are you not fixing these problems?
All right, thank you, Mr. Junis. Let me see if there are questions from, okay, you'll have questions? Okay, go ahead. Wait, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Junis, just a couple of follow-up questions, starting with the minimum design standards on page 1 of the November 12th, 2024 update report. It states on the second to last paragraph that the NCAC required minimum yield for the 192 lots is 107 gallons per minute. Are you in agreement that that's the correct number?
I didn't check the number, but quick math in my head, that seems close to what it should be. So subject to check, I would accept that number.
And then you talked about the discrepancy in the numbers in this same report that we're discussing on pages 2 and 3. On page 2, you noted that with the addition of well 4, the 4 wells will yield 121 gallons per minute. And it stated that that will exceed the minimum requirements. But then you noted on page 3 that the calculation shows 106 gallons per minute. So it appears to me that, and I'll ask Mr. Stafford this question as well, but if the correct number is 106, that's still below the minimum design standard, is that correct?
Correct. And that 75 is also referenced on page 1 of their report. So that shows up multiple times in their report.
Okay. And then I will ask Mr. Stafford these questions, but on page 2 of the report, it's a little confusing to understand the status of the installation of well number 4, because in the second to last paragraph, it states that KRJ is in the process of installing well number 4. And then it also states that installation of well number 4 has been completed. But then it states that the installation with the pump installation will be completed by March of 2025. Do you have any personal knowledge about the actual status of the installation of well number 4?
No, but I'll just give you context on sort of how this normally goes. You usually get permission or you acquire ownership of the property and then you drill the well because you want to know, is there water there before you then proceed with getting the well site approved, getting then designing plans and getting plan approval. So it's sort of awkward in that aspect that you go drilling wells around and then you decide, okay, which ones are viable and which ones are you going to develop into something that is approved for use.
Okay. And on page 2 of the report, it states that installation of the well will be completed in March of 2025. Apparently the delay is due to lack of available well contractors. Can you speak to that, whether, if you have any knowledge about whether there is a lack of well contractors that would be able to complete this more quickly, or if there really is a situation where finding well contractors justifies this delay?
So it's my understanding from conversations with the company on October 9th, their preferred well driller or vendor told them that they would not be available. So then we said, well, have you talked to anyone else? And it's my understanding that that was a work in progress, that they were looking elsewhere. It is a limited venue. It's also with the growth in the region, you have well drillers that are busy. But at this point, you kind of put yourself in the bind, right? By not getting this done before now. Yes, I think there is some availability issue, but I also do not feel that the company did much due diligence to check into the availability of well drillers.
Okay. And this may be a better question for Mr. Stafford, but there's information about wells 1, 2, 4, and 6. Well 5, is there a proposal for well 5, or do you know anything
I
about
don't
well 5?
recall a status of well 5. That very well could be a situation where you drilled in a spot, you called it well site 5, and you either got no or low flow to where you didn't develop it.
Okay. And then my last question is, you talked about the risk to the customers are low pressure and outages. Do you know whether, since the rate case order was issued in 2018, are you aware of whether there have actually been any outages at Southern Trace? And I'll ask the same question of Mr. Stafford if you don't know the answer.
There was. Thought we. Move my stuff. It's my recollection that there was an outage, but I can't tell you the exact date, and I'm happy to provide that as a late filed exhibit.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Stafford. He can be thinking about that answer as well.
Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Junis, in just tapping into your professional experience in this area, is this sort of degradation in wells common throughout North Carolina, and particularly in Wake County?
Yeah, we've seen this. Even at the scale of Aqua, we've seen wells degrade in production. That's why we sort of have that sensitivity about adequate provision of water by the developer on the front end of these systems, recognizing that you're not going to probably get more production out of these wells. It is highly likely that it's going to decrease over time to some degree. And so that's why the sensitivity. That's why, like at Bayleaf, we were very concerned that if you continue to sell capacity and not add capacity, that you're continually falling behind as some of these wells degrade.
Thank you for that. And in those situations, how, just again, thinking to the last one that you've had to deal with, how do they play out? Is it similar to what's been happening here?
So there are different ways to try to address this. There's essentially a fracking method to try to reopen those fissures, to try to restore some of the production. That does not always work. Sometimes it can actually create new water quality issues, and you don't get the production back. And in some instances, it is what it is at that point. And so then you have to look elsewhere. Can you add a new well, or can storage supplement to solve the problem? But once you fall under that design standard, you have a problem that has to be resolved.
And thank you for that. I think I was more specifically just thinking into your terms of when a company has had those situations. You know, you've talked a lot about your concern about the time lapses and their, uh, what's the normal time that, you know, can you think of an example that you've uh, dealt with something in this region where someone has been able to do this quicker? Recognizing that it's always better to have it done upfront, but
I don't recall an example directly comparable where you actually fall below the design standard. Normally it's you had that buffer on the front end. And so you degraded in quantity, but you're still above the threshold. And then you're trying to manage quality of service to the customers. How do I address the peak usage? Are there ways that we can manage the system to better withstand that? But I don't have a directly comparable. I just don't know how we can be satisfied with 6 years since the rate case to not have any tangible improvement. Nothing's complete. And I don't see a good excuse for that.
well, I guess my question ends with this. I mean, hypothetically, if this can't be fixed and if the delays are due because there isn't a cost-effective solution, what options do we have for a situation like this? Are there other utilities close by that have excess capacity? Where is Raleigh's water line?
So you have Raleigh to the north. They actually expanded into a community that essentially ran out of water. And then you have Aqua with Turner Farms directly to the south. We have not discussed with Aqua whether they have excess capacity to be able to serve this. I think before jumping there, what the company should have done was, you know, you get the easement. All right, they say they obtained the easement in 2022. Why wasn't the next step requesting the variance for the well site? Because that's the next logical step, right? If this is the production you need, you have the easement, so you have access to it. You seek the variance. If you get the variance, then you develop plans and specs and you submit them to DEQ, and hopefully you get approval, and then you construct this, connect it, and you add the water. That would reasonably, if we're using the same timeline they're now using today of, all right, we are in November, they're saying March, 4 months. Why not back in 22? Why didn't we have a 4-month timeline then? That's the problem here. How can you keep stringing along this process, potentially incurring costs that they're going to likely seek recovery of? And then also you have strung along customers with fringe service, quality service. So
Well, I said it was the last questions, but related to the other situation with where the potential solution is blending, and you seem to categorically be confident that that is not an option. Is that based on a professional judgment from DEQ, or is that specifically written in the regulations that blending is not an option here? Or is that something discretionary? Do you know?
That came from a direct conversation with Sean Geyer and Rebecca Sadowski. So, I mean, that is the section chief of public water supply. So I would take that pretty definitively. And I didn't ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Junis, just one follow-up there. You mentioned a community that ran out of water. Is that Turner Farms?
So no, Turner Farms is to the south. That's Aqua's system,
Okay.
if I recall correctly. Right? There's a community to the north that I can't remember the name of it. That sounds right. And Raleigh expanded into there. But as we all know, when a municipality expands service, it usually involves them being incorporated into that service area, and that has its challenges.
Well, incorporated into the municipal jurisdiction or ETJ, or is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So Turner
And-
Farms,
Sorry.
Turner Farms is an aqua system. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's the one that's directly to the south, if I recall correctly.
Okay, and
They have
this,
radiological issues. They've had their own challenges, but, you know, they have addressed those issues.
okay, so that was my question for you, because it appears in this November 12th update that's now part of the record that the company provided. There's a reference to Turner Farms, and specifically, the update says, refers to issues of minimal yield and failing yields in the adjoining subdivision Turner Farms. So are you familiar with, so are you familiar with Turner Farms?
The aqua system, yes.
Okay, and have there been issues of minimal yield and failing yields with respect to the wells that serve Turner Farms?
To my understanding, they are providing compliant service. I'm not gonna get into the weeds of what has or hasn't happened. Because I didn't study that system to come here today. That was not my prep for, so I don't want to misspeak. I don't want to talk about things that I do not have recall of.
Okay, that's fair. And I just wanted to, my question for you is, off the top of your head, are you aware of any of similar issues at Turner Farms?
It would not surprise me that those issues occurred there, but it's my understanding that Aqua resolved those issues.
Do you know how Aqua resolved the issues?
So I think some of that was tied to radiological, and they put filtration there, but I'm happy to dig into that and confirm exactly what they did.
Okay. I will stop short of asking you to do that for the time being. Let me see if there are any other questions before we move on. All right, do we want to, let's go through questions on the commission's questions quickly here, and we'll start with the utility.
We have no questions.
Okay, Ms. Holt.
No question.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Junis, and you may step down. And we'll excuse you too, Mr. Junis, if you need to,
Thank you.
if you need to excuse yourself. All right, Mr. Brady. I'm
Sure.
sorry, Mr. Allen.
Chair Mitchell, at this time, I'd like to move the admission of Public Staff Exhibits 1 and 2.
No objection.
All right, I'll allow that motion.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. I was born with two last names.
And
It's
it's
understandable.
unfortunate for you.
But Brady, what's the name of the right fielder for the Boston Red Sox?
So here we are. I got you. All right.
I didn't know that. I would like to call to the stand, Mr. Stafford.
All right. Now, Mr. Allen, my notes from yesterday indicate that y'all were going to call a panel. Has that plan changed?
Yes, Chair Mitchell, that plan has changed. We have been trying to reach Mr. Johnson. We left him multiple voicemails, emails yesterday, and we have not been able to get in touch with him. Frankly, we do not know what his current circumstances or situation is.
Okay. All right. So, okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, Mr. Stafford, you may step forward, please, sir. All right. Good morning, Mr. Stafford. If you would, raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. You swear the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Stafford. Could you please state your name and business address for the record?
Robert R. Stafford Jr. My business address is 246 Valleyfield Lane, Southern Pines, North Carolina, 28387.
Mr. Stafford, how long have you been in the utility business?
I'm sorry,
How long have you been in the utility business?
since 1996.
And have you ever been in a proceeding like this previously?
No,
Who filed your quarterly reports that were part of the rate case order?
When Rod Butler was running the system, and initially, and just give a little past history there. Starting in 1996, Rod Butler was the engineer as well as the operator for Southern Trace. Rockbridge did not come on until 2006, I believe it was. So Rod Butler had done basically everything from an engineering as well as administrative standpoint up until he had the accident. Fell down the steps and unfortunately landed on his head. And that was at the end of 2022, I believe. And then there was some number of months after that he wasn't sure, we weren't sure that he was going to be able to perform those functions after that.
So quite obviously, you didn't have prior notice that Mr. Butler was going to fall and hit his head.
I don't think either one of us did.
Right. And you didn't have a good understanding of whether Mr. Butler would be able to return to work or not.
Correct, for several months.
No, switching to more current matters, have you recently been able to measure the yield of well number 2?
Based on the flow meter readings for this past week, Dennis Wilson, who is our operator, indicated it was 39 gallons a minute.
And do you have a statement that you have prepared for this commission?
I do.
Would you care to read it into the record?
I can. My name is Bob Stafford. My business address is what I just said, 246 Valleyfield Lane, Southern Pines. Since 1996, I've been the principal and president of KRJ Incorporated, DBA KRJ Utilities. In that role, I'm responsible for all aspects of the regulated water and sewer utility business operations to provide service to customers in Southern Trace Subdivision and the Rockbridge Subdivision, both in Wake County, North Carolina. In addition to serving as president, I am president of a land development company named Stafford Land Company Incorporated. As the owner and operator of small water and sewer utility regulated by the commission, I want to begin by acknowledging the commission's authority to supervise and control the public utilities of the state. Service we provide to our customers is vital for their daily lives, and I know that the commission takes its responsibility seriously. I want you to know that I take my responsibility as president of the public utility just as seriously. I also want to acknowledge that KRJ has fallen short of meeting commission's reasonable expectations for how a utility should be run, and I'll offer to the commission some improvements that I believe will avoid a situation like this in the future. I understand that the focus of today's hearing is to provide the commission a cumulative update concerning the status of the project to restore well number 2 in Southern Trace to increase pumping capacity. With me today is John Johnson, who is, for some reason, Mr. Johnson was not able to be here today, who runs the engineering operations for KRJ. He's here to provide additional information on the work, or was here to provide additional information on the work that has been done and is continuing to work on it. While I regret KRJ stopped filing cumulative updates on the status of the project, restore well number 2, the work to increase pumping capacity, Southern Trace has not stopped. KRJ completed upgrades to well number 2 this summer. Actually it was back in April of 24. While well number 2 has not and likely will not return to the previous peak yield, other wells are pumping an adequate supply of water for customers. Additionally, KRJ has plans to construct additional wells in the near future, which will further increase the supply available to customers. We also, and I think this was mentioned briefly before, we also have 10,800 gallons of storage capacity at Southern Trace. My communications with public staff have always been very professional and constructive, and most of that has been through my administrative assistant, Amanda Bryan. And I want to thank them for their efforts that they have made to assist KRJ in this matter. In future, I'll take greater care to keep the commission current on the affairs of KRJ, in addition to continuing my constructive conversations with the public staff. In addition, the experience gained through communications with the public staff has made me realize that KRJ has an immediate need to improve its business operations in several ways. First, KRJ must improve responsiveness. This includes ensuring that communications from the commission are received, responses are given in a timely manner. As a small water and sewer utility, KRJ has few employees. Most of our people we work with are hired contractors. For more than 20 years, Rod Butler managed KRJ through his management company, management group in North Carolina. Following his exit 22 and early 23, transition of KRJ has had its ups and downs, including health concerns, not only from Mr. Butler, but from my assistant, who takes care of day-to-day operations, as well as speaks with the KRJ customers in both subdivisions. However, I recognize that not responding to the commission is unacceptable. Complying with commission orders is mandatory, and I'm committed to supervising my staff in its communications with the commission and public staff more closely. We will correct these issues and quickly seek compliance with all commission orders. I recognize that KRJ has a need to confirm all of its contact information with the commission, which should ensure timely receipt of notifications. I'm also working to implement a standard operating procedure, more frequently check filings at the commission related to KRJ, keep my contact information current, and to assure that I'm personally receiving communications or notifications from the commission. I personally take responsibility for improving by supervision KRJ's activities and more closely supervising KRJ's staff. In closing, I want to reiterate my understanding of the Commission's authority to regulate KRJ and to offer my apologies to the Commission on behalf of KRJ for failing to respond to the public staff's motion for order to show cause and the Commission's order on motion. I will personally and immediately be implementing these changes, some of which have already begun. With these improvements in place, KRJ will be able to better meet the expectations of the commission and the public staff. Just as important, we will be improving our customers' experience. While I regret the events that brought us to the hearing today, I do appreciate the commission providing me an opportunity to explain the mistakes that were made and the ways that we will improve in the future, recognizing that we have been in business, in the utility business, as a small utility for a period almost to include 3 decades. Mr. Johnson was planning to be referred to us being here and answering questions together. Mr. Johnson, for some reason, was not able to be here today. We talked, and he has done work and has been doing work with the operators, as well as pulling together information to do this cumulative report that he has filed through KRJ with the commission.
Mr. Stafford is available for questions.
Thank you. Some of my questions you've answered in your opening statement. So, but I would like to confirm, Mr. Stafford, you've been in the business 30 years or more. And when you obtained the CPCN for KRJ, did you understand that you were charged with complying with the statutes contained in chapter 62?
Yes. And with that, was when I brought, Rod Butler to the table to guide us through the various and sundry things that we had to do, were required to do, and did.
Right, but you do understand that as the owner of this utility, you're ultimately responsible for making sure that you comply with the statutes.
I do.
And do you understand that regulated utilities are to comply with the orders of the commission or request the commission excuse or modify an order?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
And if you can't comply with a commission's order, do you understand that you could file a notification with or request with the commission stating circumstances for which you cannot comply with the order and ask for modification?
I do.
We heard a lot about the responsibilities that Mr. Butler had in managing KRJ. And up until his accident, he was complying with the orders of the commission and filing quarterly reports, correct?
Yes.
Now, after Mr. Butler's accident and you realized he would not be able to perform his duties, did you hire someone else to perform those duties?
I didn't hire someone else. I contracted with John Johnson, engineer, to ask him to take over the engineering responsibilities. Rod Butler, as an engineer, had been performing. Also, my administrative assistant, Amanda Bryan, took over the reading of the meters, billing, customer question, et cetera, et cetera.
But aside from the engineering, did he understand the other responsibilities for which he was charged?
Amanda thought, and I thought, the answer to that was yes.
Okay. And from the record, Mr. Johnson did file a quarterly report. In October 17th, 2022. Do you have any idea why he did not file any subsequent reports?
I do not have a good answer for that, other than the fact that he did not do it.
Okay. Okay, in the public staff's Exhibit 1, its motion on page 3, the motion recounts how Mr. Junis reached out to you several times and there was no response. There was no response from you. Can you explain that?
I really don't have a good answer for that, other than it was my understanding from my administrative assistant that they went, we have a PO box that all of the payment checks from customers go to, which is 2540 in Southern Pines. My understanding is, again, most everything came that was of a commission nature to 246 Valleyfield, which is our mailing address. The only thing that I was aware of that went to the post office box, I've never been to the post office box. Amanda takes care of all that, makes the deposits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had never seen anything that came from PO Box 2540.
On page 3 of the public staff's motion, on June 16, 2023, Mr. Junis actually called you and left a message. Do you check your messages?
Obviously, I didn't because I have no recollection of receiving any call.
Do you ever check your phone messages?
I do.
Okay. And on in paragraph 10 on page 3, on August 18, 2023, Mr. Junis sent an email to you requesting that you file the missing quarterly reports. Did you receive that email?
I don't recall that email. I'm not denying that I got it, but I don't recall it. All of our emails come through my administrative assistant, and since I didn't see it, was not aware of it, I guess my assumption was that she had it.
Now, are you referring to, who is your, Miss Bryan, Amanda Bryan? Okay, and how long has she been your administrative assistant?
10 years, maybe a little more.
Okay. So does she work in a designated office?
Yes,
Okay,
at 246 Valleyfield.
okay, and someone needing to contact the company would be able to reach someone at a number where Miss Bryan would pick up?
I believe she handles everything now through her cell phone, and for the last several years.
Can you explain why KRJ did not respond to the commission's motion for show cause until 6 days before the hearing on October 2nd, 2024?
I do not recall seeing those or hearing about them until that period, during that period of time.
Okay, and how did you hear about them?
I believe Amanda brought them to my attention.
Okay. Attached to your cumulative report, which was marked as Public Staff Exhibit 2, one of the last filed updates dated 10/14/2022 was signed by Mr. Johnson. And he mentions making,
Are you just
oh,
to
okay,
clarify,
sorry.
are you referring to the KRJ cumulative update that was dated November 12? Or
Yeah.
one earlier than that?
Yes, on page 10 of the report. It's the last entry
Okay,
on that page.
yes, it is signed by Mr. Johnson.
Yes, signed by Mr. Johnson. And he explains what's going on with well site number 4. And the easement issues. And that Sorry. What has caused the delay in making the improvements mentioned in the, Ms. Johnson's October 22 report? As well as the other?
When it was determined that well site number 4 was adequate, was an adequate location. There was a slight infringement on the garage of the adjoining landowner, lot owner. And it took several months for me to get a consulting engineer that I use for those kind of items together with the landowner in order to get a prescriptive easement on the back corner of that garage. And that ultimately involved a payment to the landowner, as well as we agreed to, and he wanted, and we agreed to have a new driveway put in for him, or excuse me, not a new driveway, an overlay of his existing driveway and improvements to the drainage that was at the front of his home that had been there for 20 some years.
So you were able to successfully acquire the easement?
Yes,
Okay.
and it has been recorded. I think there's a reference to that somewhere in one of these documents.
Okay. On page 2, you state that
Page 2.
page 2 of your report, you state that it's in the middle of the second to the last paragraph. You state the installation of well 4 has been completed and KRJ will complete the pump installation after approval is received by NCDQ. And KRJ anticipates that well number 4, I'm skipping around, the installation will be completed by March 2025.
Yes.
Why has it taken over 6 years to make these, to complete the work done to well 4 and make other remediation?
I think all I can speak to accurately would be that when the encroachment was discovered, and when we sent the surveyor in there, Rod Butler was still in play and was working with the owner, and to my knowledge or my remembrance was not making much progress. And that was when I hired the consulting engineer to get involved in it at that point. Then from there, there were conversations going on, I believe, with Sean Geyer. I was not part of those conversations, but there was a conversation going on with Sean Geyer, DEQ, regarding making sure that they were happy with our game plan to have an easement on that diameter well, where the well would ultimately be, and bring that forward to getting the landowner or excuse me, lot owner happy, and getting someone in to actually install the well. During that period of time, all those wells down there have been located by a dowser. And I assume you're familiar with the dowser. That has been pretty successful to date. He estimated there would be 31 gallons a minute produced from that well, which I frankly was a little skeptical of when you start saying, you know, you're going to get this much water from this well in this location. So it went back and forth and back and forth, and back and forth, whether that was the right location. I don't know whether they got hung up with Sean Geyer or the consulting engineer or Rockbridge. I can't answer that accurately,
Okay,
but
so
it was a fairly long period of time.
from 2018 to 2022, when Mr. Butler retired.
Yes, and even after then, when the consulting engineer was acquiring the easement.
So was the easement a problem for the 4 years from 2018 to when Mr. Butler left?
I can't answer that accurately in terms of how long it actually took to get that. But I know it seemed like to me an abnormally long period of time to get it done.
That's always been an issue.
Yeah.
Mr. Stafford, the cumulative report states that you think the best option to remedy the radium issue in well one is to blend. Is well one currently online and supplying water to customers?
Yeah.
Have you consulted with DEQ regarding whether this is a viable solution?
I know John Johnson has, and I don't know what the outcome of that conversation or thought process was.
I'm sorry, say that again. You know, Mr. Johnson did what?
I know he has had conversations with Sean Geyer about that, or another gentleman whose name escapes me. It's with DEQ about the blending of the well water.
Okay, and do you know what he found out?
I do not.
Okay. All right, what,
I apologize for him not being here today. I don't know why he's not here today, because we talked about this as recently. Today is Friday, we talked about this on Wednesday.
what if DEQ does not allow mixing to resolve the MCL
He
violation?
has consulted with a firm in Blue Hill, Maine, Lowry Services, about green sand filter, with the lady that runs that, whose name is Selena Lowry. And we use the Lowry system, I'll call it, at Rockbridge for a similar problem, which has worked extremely well and effectively, as it was installed some probably 10 years ago or more.
Okay, so in lieu, if the blending is not approved, you're going to pursue the green sand filter?
That would be the other option that would be available at that point, yes.
And if that's the only available option, will you see that that's done?
Yes.
Are there any plans to take well one offline?
Not at this point.
So you are committed to fixing the problems associated with wells 1 and 2?
Yes.
Has KRJ or its contractors submitted plans and specs for fixing, for fixes to DEQ for review and approval?
John Johnson has, drawn schematics. And I don't know whether he has submitted those to Sean Yari yet or not. I have seen those and as far as I could tell, they were complete.
How will you fund these remediations that you need to have done?
We funded, roughly 34,000, or a little north of 34,000. When the replacement was done on well number 2, and that was funded from another company that I have.
Stafford Land Company?
Yes.
Has the company applied for, are you familiar with SRF loans, state revolving fund loans?
No.
So I take it the company has not applied for those.
No.
Mr. Stafford, do you think KRJ possesses the technical, managerial, and financial capabilities to continue to operate KRJ Utility and comply with DEQ and commission regulations?
Well, we've been in business for 28 years and have come through that period of time with this being my first time in front of you folks. So my answer to that would be yes.
Now you stated, first of all, how many people are on staff? On your staff? For KRJ Utilities dedicated to the water and sewer utility systems?
My son Rob, who is involved with Dennis Wilson on the maintenance end. Amanda Bryan, who takes care of all the administrative work, and myself. We have a consulting engineer that we're not an employee, but is hired on a contract basis.
Is that Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
He's hired on a contract basis?
Yeah.
Not for you. Okay.
And then Dennis Wilson, who is the operator for both systems.
Okay. And as a contractor, what are Mr. Johnson's responsibilities?
Anything involved in the engineering part of it, as far as coordination with DEQ, daily operations. I'll just sum it up by saying anything engineering related.
Does he have to dedicate a certain amount of hours?
As needed.
He's as needed?
Yes.
Okay, and so you call him when you think something is needed to be done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Either myself or my son Rob.
Okay.
We both talk to John on a fairly regular basis.
Okay.
And John has done other work for me for the past 30 years. Not just involving KRJ.
Are part of his duties now to file the quarterly reports that are due the commission?
Yes.
You also mentioned that you're working on a standard operating procedure. What is included in that, and when will that be done? Completed?
It's pretty much been implemented already.
Is it in writing?
We don't require a lot of writing with the limited employee staff that we have. It's kind of a matter of the board meeting on Monday morning, and it's what your responsibility is, and here's what's gonna be different from what we've done, including keeping me in the loop on a daily basis if need be.
Okay. Thank you. 1 minute. Mr. Stafford, you stated that you've been in the this business for 30 years. Do you acknowledge though that there's been decreased production of well two for nearly 10 years? Or 1/3 of that time? Or 1/3 of the time that you've been with the company?
Do I acknowledge the completion of yield?
Yes,
After-
for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, Mr. Stafford, I have a few questions for you. I'm gonna pick up, just briefly, off of where Ms. Holt left. In the update that you all filed on November 12th in this docket, there's attachment 2 to that filing. That is the well number 4. It's a site plan is what it appears to me. It's signed and appears to be sealed by Mr. Johnson.
Says attachment number 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
The update, as far as I can tell, does not indicate that this site plan has been recorded. It just says the site plan, let's see. The site plan for well 2 and 4 is attached as attachment 2. Has the site plan been recorded?
Easement to allow the site plans has been recorded. I don't know that. I don't think that this is a recordable document.
Okay, so there is an easement of record. I would assume that this is probably attached to that easement, but there's an easement of record at this point. Okay,
And
I'll-
it's recorded in here somewhere. Excuse me, mentioned in here somewhere.
okay, well, if it is, then I missed it and I apologize, but we'll ask that be provided as a late filed exhibit. I want the document as recorded.
Yes.
Okay. Couple of questions for you. At present, or how do customers contact the company if they have a concern or a need to discuss something with the company?
They have Amanda Bryant's cell phone number and they contact her directly.
Okay, so Amanda Bryant handles customer complaints, concerns, questions. Is that right? Okay. Do they email her or only call her?
I know she spends some time on the phone with them, mail or not.
Okay. And approximately how many calls or instances of contact does the company receive from customers in an average month? Do you ever discuss that with Ms. Stafford? I'm sorry, with Ms. Bryant?
If there is something that we need from a maintenance standpoint, leak, it's noticed by one of the homeowners, that type of thing is brought to my attention. But I don't know the volume of that, whether it's 1 a month or 10 a month or 20 a month.
Okay. All right. Ms. Holt asked you questions about your failure to respond to the public staff's inquiries during the year 2023. Do you remember those questions? Okay. And as I understand the record in front of us at this point in time, when when the last quarterly report was filed back in October of 2022, there was a period of time during which the company made no filings with the commission and during which the public staff was unable to make successful contact with the company, but for one instance of contact with Mr. Johnson. Do you understand the record the same way I do? Okay. In your opinion, is it acceptable that the agency that works closely with the commission and exercising oversight pursuant to Chapter 62 was unable to make contact with the company for an extended period of time?
No.
Okay. Is it acceptable that the company failed to comply with its obligation set forth in the commission order to file quarterly reports? Is it acceptable that the company failed to respond to the commission's order directing an update that was issued I think it was in May of this year, regarding its instances of noncompliance?
No.
So in other words, the company met noncompliance with noncompliance. Is that acceptable?
Say that again?
The company's noncompliance was met with noncompliance. I mean, you had been noncompliant, we ordered you to comply, and you continued to fail to comply. Is that acceptable? Am I,
Not
okay,
acceptable.
okay. How is this commission to ensure that the company is providing adequate and reliable service to its customers, which is this commission's charge under North Carolina statutory law, if the company is not responsive to the commission or to the public staff?
The cumulative report has been filed that you referred to earlier. Going forward, that cumulative report will and should and will reflect what is being done towards solving problems that have been brought to bear.
All right. Now, Mr. Stafford, you understand under North Carolina law, this commission has the authority to appoint an emergency operator.
I do.
To the extent that the commission determines that that emergency conditions are imminent.
I do.
And help me understand why this commission should conclude that a total lack of response from the utility does not constitute an emergency or an imminent emergency.
I guess the sensible answer to that would be the steps that we've taken since it was brought to our attention, plus our past record for almost 3 decades of being in compliance during that period of time.
And I want to be clear, the statute actually says an emergency is defined for purposes of statute as the imminent danger of losing adequate water or sewer utility service or the actual loss thereof. Do you understand the public staff's position in this proceeding to be that the wells, the service provided by the wells that are in operation at Southern Trace to be functioning right at or right below the design standard?
I do.
Okay. And the public staff has expressed the risk to adequate water service that exists as a result of the status of the wells. Do you understand the position of the public staff in this proceeding?
I do.
Okay. And from what I can tell, I understand the company is taking steps to ameliorate the situation at Southern Trace. But there has been, other than the maintenance work that was performed on well 2 this summer, there's been no action by the company to actually to provide additional water to the customers. Understand there's been some planning work, but we're still in the same position that we were in, absent the maintenance work that was done this summer, as we were in 2018 when we heard the rate case.
My understanding is from Mr. Johnson that all he's waiting for is a response from Sean Geyer that we're okay to proceed with well number 4. And the $34,000 that was spent on well number 2 back in April, May of this year to replace the cable, pump, camera the well. Try to determine what it, and the yield on that well is up about 5 gallons a minute. That's not a big deal, but it's headed in the right direction.
Well, my understanding from the testimony that public staff gave today is that for well 4, there has to be DEQ still has to take regulatory action. There has to be a variance approval, and the DEQ actually has to approve the plans and specifications for the well before it can actually be placed into service. Do you have a different understanding of the regulatory status of well 4?
Not other than it's in process at this point.
Okay. And the date that you all are anticipating having that well in service is early, or I think for into first quarter 2025. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And
part of that, the largest part of that is simply having contractors enabled to do that. We have on most of our wells, including Rockbridge, we have predominantly used NW Pool. And when Bob Peter was alive, or active, I should say, I'm assuming he's still with us, possibly not, but during that period of time, we've used those 2 entities for our wells. So it's always nice to be able to, when you bring somebody back in from a maintenance standpoint, to be able to utilize somebody that is familiar with what was done when the well was installed. That may not be possible today simply because of what Mr. Junis referred to earlier about population growth and all those things coming together and people being hard to get on the job within a period of 2 or 3 or 4 months. I have talked with a well driller that and maintenance guy that is down in Moore County where I live, and he has agreed to come aboard as soon as we get word from DEQ, come aboard and install well number 4. I'm sorry, install all the workings of well number 4.
all right. Well, I'm not unsympathetic or unaware of the challenges associated with operating utility. I've been sitting in the seat for a little while now and hear from utilities, water and sewer and gas and electric and all of them, and understand the challenges of labor, materials, timing and macroeconomic forces that slow things down and unforeseen circumstances that cause problems. But we're now at 10 years. So from where I sit, we're at 10 years. Your customers are at risk for inadequate service to the extent that they're not already experiencing adequate service. And we've got a situation where the utility was just flat out non-responsive to orders of this body to provide us with an update. So I want to kind of keep separate here the fact that we're 10 years out and we're still waiting on all of these things to come together to put that well into service. I understand all the things that have to come together for you to put that utility plant in service, but it's taken an inordinately long time to get there. And you all went for at least a year of being non-responsive to this commission. I want to talk about Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson's work is in this record. He submitted the last update that we have of record, well, the previous to the cumulative update, the one that's dated October 22. And you testify that he's done some work out at the well site, and he took the 39 gallon per minute measurement earlier this week. I believe that was your testimony, but he's not here.
That did not come from Mr. Johnson. That came from our operator, Dennis Wilson.
Okay, that came from Mr. Wilson. Well, then let me get to my point. It's of concern to me that Mr. Johnson isn't here. He's obviously under contract with the company to perform services. This proceeding is very significant to the utility. Again, we are here because we are trying to determine, one, whether this utility is capable of providing adequate and reliable service under North Carolina law, and two, whether it has certain capabilities that we require for it to continue to operate this franchise. And Mr. Johnson, who's performing the engineering work at these sites, isn't here. That's of concern to me. What did you tell him about coming here today?
That it was imperative for him to be here, and your term concern, my concern about him not being here,
What did you direct?
not a strong enough term.
Okay. Well, I interrupted you, and I want to make sure the record reflects your words. So tell me what you told him about being here today.
Not only did I tell him, but Council Brady Allen told him that it was imperative for him to be here today, and we were going to do a dog and pony show together to make sure that the engineering portion of it, what had been done there, as well as the ownership portion of it, was conveyed to you folks that you felt comfortable by the time we get done, hopefully.
Well, I'm gonna go easy on you when you use the term dog and pony show, because that's not what happens in this building. And if it is, we got a problem. What I want is, I want credible evidence from the utility that it is going to put the well in service so that we can be assured that adequate and reliable service is being provided to customers that we have responsibility for and that the utility has responsibility for. I want to be assured that the utility has the technical and the managerial capabilities to do its job. Mr. Johnson's not showing up gives me, it increases the concern that we had when we issued this order to begin with. So anything else that you can say about his not being here? Did you call him? Did you text him? Anything that you can tell me? Was he in an automobile accident, or is there some unforeseen circumstance that keeps him from being here right now?
I can't answer the question as to why he's not here right now, but at 9:30, when my counsel and I were standing out in the lobby, I called him and his phone went to voicemail.
Okay.
And I believe, if I'm correct, you tried the same thing late yesterday afternoon or this morning.
Yes. For the record, multiple times, Mr. Stafford and I tried to call Mr. Johnson yesterday to confirm that he'd be present today, and we reached voicemail multiple times. Emails weren't responded to as well.
All right. Well, Mr. Johnson has, the personal knowledge of the regulatory status at this site, and that's obviously one of the issues that we're here to better understand. All right. During at any point in time in recent years, has KRJ not billed its customers?
Not billed?
Correct, not billed.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so even in 2022, when Mr. Butler's out, billing continued. And-
Mr. Butler did the billing.
Correct, and then he was out at some point in 2022, and somebody assumed that responsibility?
Yeah.
Okay. Who was that?
And the Bryant.
Okay. Does Amanda Bryant also collect the checks that go to the mailbox?
Yes.
Okay. And does Mr. Junis in his testimony alluded to a situation at Rockbridge where the contract operator wasn't paid? Are you aware of that situation? And why did that happen?
That was during a period of time that I should have stepped up and wrote the checks during that period of time. Amanda Bryan had a double ablation on her heart, which I don't really know what that is, but apparently it's pretty serious. And she was out for a period of almost 3 months. So some of those bills didn't get paid on a timely basis. I personally met with 2 of the DEQ gentlemen on site at Rockbridge, and Dennis Wilson, who's the operator. And we went through that from start to finish. And within a period of, I think it was about a week, everybody was up to speed and had been paid.
All right, while Ms. Bryant was out with her medical issues, did billing of the customers continue?
As I recall, billings went out, but they were late for that period of time.
Who was sending them out at that period of
I
time?
think she finally got those done. Amanda.
So, well, I want to make sure I understand what was happening. Was she out of the office for a period of time?
Yeah.
Completely?
Yes.
And how long was that?
Approximately 3 months.
And so customers were not billed during that 3-month period of time?
Billed, but they were paid basis.
So they weren't, so,
She was doing that from home. She does a lot of work from home.
okay, but she didn't pay bills, but she didn't pay the invoices that you all are receiving from service providers like your operator, but she was sending out bills to the customers. Okay. Let's talk for a minute about, well, one, I'm not, I have concerns about what I've heard so far about the plan for well one. Because from where I sit, you've got well two, which is at diminished capacity. We've got well four, which is the regulatory status of which is not exactly clear based on this record. I understand the work that has been done and that there is an intention to move forward once you get your necessary authority to proceed from DEQ, but we don't have a clear timing of when that's actually going to happen so that customers will benefit from that well four. So we've got diminished well two, and then well one that's at some risk here for, I assume, regulatory action by the environmental regulator if you can't get it into compliance. What are we gonna, how are we gonna take care of well two? I mean, all that you have in your update is, you all have concluded that, blending, which is the least cost solution, is the solution that will be implemented. But if that's not, how quickly can you get the filtration installed on the well?
But we also have well number 3 that you did mention.
Understand? And that, let's knock on wood that well number 3 continues to function. It seems like it's the horse that we're gonna have to ride, but I'm curious about well number 1. So we've got well number 1 whose status is uncertain. We've got well number 2, which is at diminished capacity. You've got well number 4 tentatively planned to come on. We don't know when. So if you lose well 1, what happens?
If we lose well number 1,
Yes,
if it is shut down in its entirety.
yes.
I know John Johnson has talked with Selena Lowry about a temporary fix. It will be similar to the system that we use in Rockbridge.
So it's something other than actual filtration?
Yes,
Okay, so there's filtration and then
Yeah,
there's a
I-
temporary
I
fix.
can't elaborate on what that is.
And that, see, that's why, again, if Mr. Johnson were here, I would ask him, and perhaps his information could help me feel more comfortable that there's a plan in place for well one. But what I have so far on well one is just that, to the extent the DEQ does not give you authority to blend as you've proposed, you have to take additional action, and we don't know how long it's gonna take to get there. All right. Let me see if there are questions from the other commissioners here. We'll start with, let me start with Commissioner Hughes.
We've been, we've been talking a lot about, excuse me, managerial and technical capacity in the last few minutes. I want to shift gears a little bit to the third leg of the stool, which is financial capacity. A couple things I heard during this hearing was, one that was, the company is losing money or has been losing money. Is that true? Or did I hear that right? That financially now it's not above water? Is that from a cash standpoint or is that from an accounting standpoint?
Well, I'm not sure where that number came from, but I know that for all these years, we've been able to pay our bills.
So when I say cash, that's what I mean by that. You're not having to borrow money to pay a bill. The money that comes in from the customers can pay your actual day-to-day bills. What about a large capital project? We know some of these solutions that we've been talking about can be quite expensive and can catch you off guard and require a very large payment and a quick basis. I think I heard you say that one of your other companies was capable of paying a large kind of last minute need. Is that true? Did I hear that? Is that generally how you've paid for something, say over $10,000 in the past?
Up to a point, yes. I mean, that number would be green sand filter, that's an example. Sister company and bank to do it.
And so I understand a bank, you'll take a loan, but from a sister company, how exactly do you deal with that? Do you make a loan to the sister company? Is that, and when you say that you're able to pay your bills, are part of your bills a loan payment to the sister company that you're paying back?
Paid back.
It's already been paid back.
Yeah.
And when it was being paid back, that was the same thing. You were just using kind of the monthly bill revenue to pay it. So that's what you would do in the future?
And we keep a certain amount of reserve. KRJ for normal maintenance items that are above and beyond the monthlies.
And is that reserve had to increase with some of the things that have been occurring the last 3 to 4 years? Is that reserve increased at all, or is it, as you were saying, that reserve is set up to do the daily expenditures, but I think a green sand filter would, do you have enough in reserve to
Green sand
do?
filter would not be expenditure,
Okay, so you would have to,
that'd be a capital.
okay. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's really hypothetical. I mean, you yourself have said that is a potential realistic option moving forward. Do you have an estimate of what that system would cost?
They're over $100,000.
And so you don't have $100,000 in the reserve.
No.
Is your sister company willing to provide $100,000?
I'd have to meet with the directors, which would be.
We can take a moment if you could meet with yourself. Could you?
I think we can handle that.
Okay.
Mr. Stafford, if you would pull the microphone towards you a little bit, make sure our court reporter can hear you.
That better?
Yeah. Okay. So you think, or you're I mean, again, I think Chair Mitchell has said, if that goes out tomorrow, you're responsible, but we have shared responsibility in this room. So tomorrow you could write a check for $100,000. I mean, not tomorrow, but you know what I mean.
Soon.
Soon. So that's the short-term financial capability, but the other aspect, which is kind of defined by BPA and DEQ for kind of a long-term financial sustainability, would be to then actually pay that money back, make it so that it's an ongoing concern for you. With $100,000 payment, are you going to be able to pay your bills moving forward if you have to do that loan? I mean, have you looked at any kind of financial forecast of what that would do to the finances? And again, I know some of this is in the record of your monthly revenue, but I don't have it in front of me. So is 100,000, what is your annual revenue?
Total annual revenue is approximately $600,000.
Okay. So 100,000 could, with some cutting, could, okay.
Over a period of a couple of years could be absorbed in there, yeah.
Okay. Have you gone to a bank to borrow any funds for this system? I mean, so it's all just this relationship you have with with your other company?
We have not gone to a bank to explore a loan from them for a large capital expenditure, no.
Okay. So is this are you confident that with everything that we've talked about, you can continue to make money on this system, which is a prerequisite for you actually having the incentive to run the system and pay your bills? Are you confident moving 5-10 years forward that this is an ongoing financial concern with worst case scenarios of what we've been talking about?
I don't see any issue with being able to handle a large capital expenditure outside of our normal cash flow.
But then moving forward, you can recover that in a way that still leaves you money to pay daily service.
Yes.
How long did it take you to pay off the greens? I mean, are these short-term, long-term loans that you would imagine making?
Well, we had an expenditure back in April or May of $34,000 that was not part of our normal daily or normal monthly expenditures. And it is paid back, probably paid down less than half of what it was at that point.
Okay.
That was for the work that was done on well number 2.
Okay, in a given year. So it's not a question of multiple years. You're able to pay some of these loans back quite quickly.
Yes.
When was the last time that you visited the system?
That I visited the system?
Yeah, I mean, was it last week before? What?
I was at Southern Trace a week ago today,
Okay.
and I was at Rockbridge same day, I believe it was.
Okay. And did you see any customers when you were out there, or did you meet with the operator? Okay.
Amanda does all the work with the customers.
Okay. Do you know, and maybe this is a question for her, does she deal with all these customers individually, or is there a homeowner association that is kind of aware of what's going on, or is it all just kind of word of mouth? I'm just. I mean, I know you're a small system and we don't expect you to have an elaborate website and, so I'm just, how are the customers being kind of kept informed of all this?
Somebody has a question or an issue, they call her cell phone direct.
Okay, so it's all on an individual basis. Is there any, do you know if there's a homeowner station or a neighborhood
There's a
association?
homeowners association, but, and she deals with the president of the homeowners association from time to time,
Okay,
but it mostly has to do with the filling and or emptying of the pool in the recreation area.
okay. So there's not kind of periodic meetings or anything. I think that's all. Thanks.
So, Mr. Stafford, I have a few questions to follow up on pretty much Chair Mitchell's questions. And Mr. Junis talked about the risk of low pressure and outages. And I asked him if he was aware of any outages since the rate case order in 2018. Can you let the commission know whether there have been any outages since 2018?
I'm not aware of any outages, no.
Okay. Is that, so is your response that there have been no outages, or you just don't know whether there
I
have
don't know
been?
whether there had been or not, but it would have certainly been brought to my attention if there had been an outage.
Okay.
And I assume when you define outage, you're talking about not having any water. Because we have supplemental storage there of 10,000+ gallons.
Okay. So how have you had to use the supplemental storage, the water in the supplemental storage since 2018? Has that been necessary?
I'm not sure that I can answer that. That would be more of a question for the operator.
Okay. And that would be a question for
On a
Mr.
daily basis.
For Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay. And Chair Mitchell had asked some questions. I think you've responded to the best of your ability, but I just want to see if you can give any more information about well number 4 and the approvals that are needed from DEQ. Can you tell the commissions to the best that you can, specifically what applications have been made to DEQ and what you're waiting on and what applications you still need to make to DEQ for putting well number 4 into operation?
I'm not trying to dodge that question, but I see since Mr. Johnson has arrived, he may be able to answer that.
Okay.
Better than I.
Okay. And then I had talked to Mr. Junis about the minimum design standards, and I think you might recall that he testified about a discrepancy in the numbers from the November 2024 report on pages 2 and 3. And on page 2, I'll just refresh your memory. The statement is that with the addition of well number 4, the 4 wells will yield.
Sorry, what page are you on?
Page number 2, and it is the last sentence on the second to last paragraph. And I'll just read it for you. With the addition of well 4, the 4 wells will yield 121 gallons per minute, which exceeds the NCAC minimum requirements. And then on page 3, the calculations show the new yield that includes well number 4 is 106 gallons per minute. Are you able to tell the commission which number is correct?
Well, it would appear from Mr. Johnson's numbers that the 106 is correct. But I'm not sure.
Okay. And if the 100
You're taking those numbers from the cumulative update, I believe.
That's correct, yes. And so my concern is that if the 106 number is correct, that is, that does not meet the required design standard.
106 does not, and I don't know whether that was a mathematical error or I'm not sure what it was.
Okay. And then you talked about, I think you testified in response to the public staff's attorney that you had plans, plural plans, plans to install additional wells. And I know that you have, we have well number 4, and then in the update, the November update, you refer to well number 6. And in well number 6, and this is again on page 2, it's going to be the last sentence of the last paragraph. This relates to well number 6. It says KRJ is in the process of arranging an on-site inspection for DEQ for well number 6. Can
And I
you,
believe that's scheduled for next week, if I remember correctly,
okay. And,
with the system engineer.
and are there any application, do you know whether there, whether KRJ has submitted any applications to DEQ for well number 6?
I would ask you to direct that question to our engineer.
And then,
I don't know specifically whether there is, but I was told that there was an on-site inspection scheduled for next week.
and then there, in addition to wells 4 and 6, there's reference to well number 5. Is well number 5 still a possibility for, are you still planning to install well number
I
5?
believe well number 5 was taken off the list of things to do because of the Dowser's report of what he found there. It was a crossing of veins that would not be financially feasible. That's
So-
the reason the jump from 4 to 6.
Okay, so the reference to well number 5 I see was still a possibility in October of 2023. But since this time last year, well number 5 is no longer considered to be a viable option.
That's correct.
And you talked about new standard operating procedures that you have implemented, but they have not been actually written down as a document. So Mike, can you provide some more detail about what those specific new procedures will be, even though you have not memorialized them in writing?
That I be kept in the loop, all aspects of KRJ. 1. Number 2, my son, Rob, lives in Wake County and is closer to the facilities than I. That he be contacted first on any issues that go off on alarms or what have you. That he be contacted first so that he can be on scene. Dennis Wilson's the operator and he's on person. He's first to be contacted. Now, we changed that to my son being first on scene.
And do you think it would be appropriate, considering where we are today, to prepare some detailed operating procedures that are memorialized in writing so that they're
They can be put in writing without a problem.
and then about you talked about how that you contact Mr. Johnson as needed for his services.
Yeah.
Do you have a contract with Mr. Johnson?
No,
And
John and I have been working together for about 30 years. I don't know that we ever had a contract.
And when you talked about the duties of Mr. Johnson, you said that you would contact him when he was needed. Who was tasked with the duty of preparing and filing the quarterly reports with the commission?
Mr. Johnson was.
And were you in communication with him to ensure that that was being accomplished?
We're in communication very often, but for some reason that fell through the cracks.
And do you have a written contract, I assume, with Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we need to take a break. I want to take a short break for the court reporter. Let's go off the record. We will be back on the record at 12:30. Questions on commissioners' questions? And we'll start with public staff. Actually, Ms. Holt, before you start, I have one more question for the witness. Mr. Stafford, are you familiar with the company's obligation to file annual reports with this commission?
Yes,
Do you know who filed the last or the latest report on behalf of the company?
Amanda Bryan.
Okay. Did you review that report?
Yes, I do.
Did Amanda Bryant prepare the report?
Yes,
So is she handling the books for the company?
yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stafford. All right.
Mr. Stafford, after some information that we recently received, was there a partial system outage in Southern Trace in April
Was there a what?
2024? A partial system outage in April of 2024?
Not unless it came from a main leak.
So you're not aware?
I'm not aware of any, no. It's hard to have an outage when you've got 10,000 gallons of supplemental.
Well, would you accept that a customer informed us that they were out of water in April?
From something other than a leak.
I'm not objecting to that. That's asking him to accept some hearsay statements from somebody else. There's no way that could be verified. That's not a
Okay,
appropriate question.
so you.
Hang on, Ms. Holt, do you want to respond or will you withdraw the question?
I withdraw.
Okay.
That question. Would you be aware of an outage if there had been one?
When?
Would you have been informed of any outage of your system?
Yes. When was your outage reported?
In April
April this year?
this year, yeah. Who would they have called if
They
they
would
were?
have called, at that time, they would have called Dennis Wilson.
Okay. Not Miss Bryant.
No.
Okay, how do customers know who to call? Is it on the bill? Is it just, how do they know who to call in the event of an emergency?
It's on the bill.
Okay,
But there's a system that it goes to if you call number one doesn't answer, not available, what have you, goes to number two, number three.
okay, well, who's number one?
At that time,
Yes,
it was Dennis Wilson.
Dennis Wilson. Now, you also stated that Miss Bryan calls go to her cell phone.
Right.
Is that through this rollover system?
I'm not sure what the system is, but it goes 1, 2, 3.
So if no one answers line number one, it goes to who? It goes to Dennis Wilson first.
Right.
And then
My
to
son
your son.
second,
Okay,
because he's fairly close to both systems geographically.
okay,
And then it goes to Amanda Bryan, number 3.
okay. Now, is that for any complaint, service, billing error, or billing issue?
If it's billing or general comments or some normal thing, I think it goes to her cell phone directly. Because there would be no need, if somebody had a question on billing,
Mhm.
maybe no need for it to go to Dennis because he has nothing to do with that, nor does my son.
Right, but how would they know who the call should
As far as the
be.
technicalities of it, I don't know that I can answer that.
So do you have a recording saying if this is a billing issue, hit press 2, and if it's an outage, press 1 or something like that?
I think the billing says if you have any billing issues and or general questions, here's the number to call. That's Amanda's number.
Is that on the bill or
I
is
believe
that
it.
a recording?
I believe it is.
You believe it
On
is,
the
but you don't know.
I don't, I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. No,
All right. How do you track customer calls? Does Miss Bryan keep a log of customer calls and the nature of the calls?
I don't know whether she keeps a log or not.
Okay,
A past calls you're talking about?
yes,
I don't know.
customer calls, complaints.
I don't know.
Does Mr. Wilson keep track of the types of calls customer calls that
I
come
don't
in?
know what their procedures as far as,
Okay, so there
Past
isn't a,
calls.
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what their log, as you referred to, I think. Past calls, how that's recorded or what have you.
Okay, well, would something like that be a part of your new policies and procedures?
Yes.
If we wanted to check and see if customers or how many customers reported service problems or outages, how would we determine that?
Or normal questions or just an outage?
Outages in particular, service-related problems.
If it's an outage, a real outage,
Yes.
that would have to go to Dennisville.
Right, but could we contact him and, or you contact him and get a list of complaints that had come in to him? That had been called in?
Sure.
Okay, do you require him to keep that type of information?
From an outage standpoint, yes. And as I said, I'm not aware of any outages that we have
Okay,
because of the supplemental storage.
okay, how do you know that for a fact?
Dennis would call my son and my son would call me.
Okay, but is it fair to say that you don't have a process in place where he would, or he's required to, keep track of the names and the address and the nature of whatever complaint has come in?
We don't have a written record.
Right, thank you. All right. To follow up on Commissioner Hughes's questions. And Chair Mitchell, I would move that the commission takes judicial notice of KRJ's annual report that was filed on May 10th, 2024. I apologize, I don't have copies.
I've heard no objection and, consistent with our statutory authority under 6265B, the commission will take judicial notice of the most recently filed annual report.
Thank you. Mr. Stafford, Who prepared the company's annual report that was filed on May 10th, 2024?
Amanda Brown.
Okay, do you recall, that your signature, your verification is actually, oh, I'm sorry, Robert Stafford Jr. verified the annual report that was filed? Is that
Do I recall
Robert
what?
R. Stafford Jr.? Is that you or that's you?
That is.
Okay. And do you recall signing a verification on
I
the,
recall signing that specific report.
yes, okay. May I approach? Do that and look at the, last page.
Yes.
Okay. And you, read the outline.
This verification, you may read it out loud. This verification shall be completed by either chief executive officer, senior level financial officer, or the responsible accounting officer.
Okay, and is that your signature?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stafford, I don't have a copy. But on page 13 of the annual report,
Of what you just showed.
yes. On page 13 of this page entitled Schedule of Debt of Utility, listed under current amount outstanding. Would you accept, subject to me showing it to you, that outstanding debt of the utility is listed as $2,832,424.
I think that comes from the balance sheet of the tax return, which is not a current reflection of outstanding debt.
Okay, but that's what's listed here. Current amount outstanding is what's listed on the annual report at an interest rate of 8%.
I think that coincides with the remaining amount from when the system was originally built. It is still, from an accounting standpoint, still outstanding.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And on page 14, entitled Water and Sewer Combined Income Statement and Retained Earnings Statement, on line 30, net income is listed as negative $113,414.76.
And your question
Is
is,
that, is that accurate to your,
I have no recollection of it.
will you verify
You're
the information?
you're getting into CPA questions now. I'm sorry, say that again.
Finish your question, so that we don't have your option.
Okay.
Well, do you doubt this information is correct if it's on your verified?
I can't doubt it or not doubt it
Okay.
without knowing the source of it.
Well, what would be the source of this information provided on your annual report?
I would assume that that's what Amanda pulled together along with our CPA.
Okay, so Amanda and your CPA prepared and then you verify the information is correct.
Correct.
Okay. So you verify under oath regarding the accuracy of the report without reviewing the number?
So it's a trick question.
No, it's not. But you're saying that you are not aware that net income recorded on your annual report is negative $113,414.76.
I certainly don't recall that number or where it was and when it was. If I saw it and reflected on it with the CPA and Amanda's concurrence, no.
Okay. It's not important to you to know that you have negative amount of income? Not a concern?
Just for clarification, this is really very unfair to the witness to sit over there and read numbers.
Mr. Allen, make sure you're on a mic.
I would have we would have no objection if she wants to show it to him, but net income also reflects depreciation and tax and all that other stuff. So there still could be buckets of cash out there that would be available for projects. So I'm not sure.
Show it to him.
Well, I think that would be a
Okay.
helpful thing to do. Thank you.
Well, as council just referred to, depreciation expense up here is $174,000. So I'm not, as I say, I'm not a CPA, so I don't know whether that's reflected in that number or not. I know that this is a sub S corporation and that net deduction flows through to me personally. And
Okay.
it never shows a positive number. So I think after depreciation, if depreciation is 174,000, then you could have 174,000 of positive income and it would be a zero.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Okay, thank you. I don't think I have any additional questions.
Mr. Allen, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Stafford, I just have one or two questions. Chair Mitchell asked you some questions about, the payments to your operator, Mr. Dennis Wilson. How would you characterize your relationship with Dennis Wilson now, currently?
Well, I talked to him about 8:30 this morning and verified that flow meter on well number 2. And I called him in about 10 minutes. He called me back and gave me the information I needed. So
It's a
I mean,
working
I
relationship.
think it's a good business relationship, yes.
Thank you.
It has been for 6 or 7 years, maybe a little more.
No further questions. Thank you.
All right, with that, Mr. Stafford, you may step down. Appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
That's
Chair Mitchell, if I may, Mr. Johnson is here in the
Go ahead,
courtroom.
call him.
and is available.
Let's call him to the stand.
KRJ calls Mr. Johnson to the stand.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. If you would, left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Could you please state your name and business address for the record?
John Wiley Johnson. I'm a professional engineer and professional land surveyor. My address is 4612 Gunston Place, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27612-3948.
Today, there have been some questions about the cumulative update that was filed on November 12th. Particularly, there's a chart on page 3 of that where it says the new yield. And for well number 2, it lists the new yield for that as 20. Is that number accurate?
No, it isn't, and I'm glad that you pointed it out. I did that late, one afternoon before I sent it. And I just happened to put 20 down. I was looking at well number 3 to verify the flows coming from there. That is actually 35. And the 106 total shown over at the right-hand side of the column is 121. I will note, I was surprised with my inaccurate number. That was 15 gallons per minute low. Using the total, we're still within the proper available gallons per day with 192 lots. So it's an error, but I'm sorry.
And this morning, were you in the field today?
Yes. I had, and I apologize for my address. I had a call late yesterday afternoon, a construction problem. I went out to work with it. It was going to take a half hour, and it ended up taking much longer. And when you're there in the field with a large backhoe and a crew of men, and everybody's waiting for a decision, I get kind of involved in what I'm doing. So I came back, I'd left my phone at home. I picked up my phone and Bob had called saying, I hope you're on your way. So I came straight here. So I'm sorry.
Do you have a statement that you have prepared for this hearing today?
Well, yes.
Would you care to read it?
Okay. My name is John Wiley Johnson. I'm a professional engineer licensed state of North Carolina, currently serve as contract manager for KRJ. And as contract manager, I provide engineering and operational service at the utility location in North Carolina. I've been serving as contract manager for KRJ since 2022, replaced Rod Butler, who had stopped serving in that capacity due to an accident. Prior to assuming my responsibilities as contract manager, I provided engineering and operational services to other wastewater operations in both municipal and private sectors. I'm appearing today with Bob Stafford, who is the principal and president of KRJ Utilities. The appearance is required due to the order rescheduling show call hearing issued by the commission in September 27, 24. In its order, the commission directed KRJ meet public staff on or before October 9, 24 to inform the public staff on the status of the system and respond to any requests for information made by the public staff. Following that meeting, KRJ and the public staff agreed that KRJ would provide updated information to the public staff by Monday, October 14th. As agreed, KRJ provided documents to the public staff which addressed the radiological issue, including summary of green sand treatment system and a summary of water quality. The filing provided a diagram showing the options for additional well capacity to supplement the capacity issues related to well number 2. As Mr. Stafford has previously stated, I also want to offer my apologies to the commission public staff for failure to provide quarterly reports as required by the commission in its previous order. We understand that this is unacceptable and it will be fixed. As to the service issues, we're aware of the NOV issued by the Department of Environmental Quality regarding contamination of effluents at the Rockbridge subdivision. The Rockbridge system is a good system, and that problem has been resolved by increasing the chlorine feeds into the system. That has been addressed, and we believe the issue can be quickly resolved. The second service issues involves inadequate pumping capacity from the 3 wells used to provide service at the Southern Trace subdivision. While the issue is somewhat offset by existing storage capacity, it is apparent that additional well capacity will be needed. The problem resulted from an unexplained reduction in pumping capacity from well number 2, which initially had a pumping capacity of 72 gallons per minute, which decreased to 20 gallons per minute. Well number 2 has been refurbished and augmented to provide additional pumping capacity of 35 gallons per minute. The challenge with Southern Trace subdivision is that the property is essentially filled with home sites, and the land available for possible well sites is somewhat limited. Nonetheless, KRJ has explored additional well sites to address this issue. Because of the shortage of available land, some of the well sites may be located adjoining, well, it says in a floodplain area. Yeah, okay, it's in a floodplain area. Although well sites can be located in such area, it adds additional complications to the construction and operation process, which will need to be evaluated. As noted in the cumulative update that was filed November 12th, KRJ has already installed well number 4. The pump installation will be completed by March 2025. KRJ anticipates this well will produce additional 31 gallons per minute. With the additional well 4, the 4 wells will yield 121 gallons per minute. The final service issue involves the need to remediate the issue of radiological materials that are sometimes present in well number 1. Initially, it should be noted that the existence of radiological materials is not always present, and when detected, the concentration of the materials are generally only marginally above the levels found acceptable. Assuming that is the case, it is possible that the blending of water from the existing wells will alleviate the problem. Radiological issues can be remediated with the green sand system. However, these systems are very expensive, particularly for a relatively small system. Another possible remedy is to capture the radiological materials and transport them to disposal at the Rockbridge wastewater treatment plant. Blending the water is the most cost-effective approach. Thank you. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
All right, public staff.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, on October 17, 2022, you actually filed a quarterly report for KRJ. Isn't that
That's
correct?
Yes, I did that. Rod Butler was leaving, and I guess he had ended his contractual relationship. He didn't want to file it. I reviewed it. It seemed adequate, and I filed it.
Okay. Now on, in the public staff motion, for show cause, I don't know whether you have a copy or not, but, on page 3, paragraph 12, public staff states that on, I'll let you get there. Paragraph 12.
He doesn't have a copy.
No,
Would you put a
no,
copy
this
in
is-
front of him, please?
I do not have that.
I'll get it.
Page 3.
Okay.
Okay, paragraph 12. And it states on September 20, 20th, 2023, Mr. Junis emailed you regarding the delinquent quarterly report filing. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. And you're also quoted as saying, do you see where I am?
yes.
Okay. I had understood that KRJ had retained someone, and it continues over to page 4, had retained someone to prepare the public staff documents, but now I understand that those documents are for the utility rates. I will make an effort to respond ASAP. Now, from the record, you did not respond. You did not file those reports as you promised on September 20th. Can you explain why?
Well, actually, I spent probably a month going through files. If any of you have ever received a batch of files put together by someone else in a computer and then tried to segregate where they are, and it becomes so tedious that actually I had other projects that I had to work on. And it's one of those things. It was just there on the back burner. And actually, one of the things I saw is the radiological was below the limit on one, above it on another. And most of that just, I've been doing this for 50 years, filing in, and we have all kind of limits on various things. And sometimes I could go in and recommend a lot of things be done, but I don't know that there's a benefit to the ratepayers with that. So I try to prioritize things that are public health, public safety, but I mean, exactly where is that fine line? Now, because I've run into so many where we have limitations set on materials, and when we find out a bit later, they're not what it was claimed to be. It's not a bad thing. I mean, the one that really kills me, I have probably spent $1 million of ratepayers' money sending transformers to Hartsville, South Carolina, because they had PCB in them. So they had to go for hazardous waste disposal. Well, PCB was listed as a possible human carcinogenic before 1977. And that is what it's still listed. Now, at some point, if we're going to spend all this money, shouldn't we know or have some confidence? Is it a possible human carcinogenic, or is it a carcinogenic? And I mean, that's a little bit out there, but I do look at the things where we're dealing with minerals in the water that sometimes we remove. Well, for instance, at Southern Trace, that has a high manganese content and high iron content. And we use a sequestering agent there that encapsulate the manganese and the iron. So basically, so you don't have stained clothes in your washing machine. And that creates a problem because that does have some type of polymer material in the sequester. And because that subdivision has 6-inch lines, which are much larger than they should be, but that was the Wake County requirement when it was built. So we know the material is there. As long as it's not disturbed, there's not a problem. But occasionally there will be flakes of that pop, and you will have customers complain about that material.
Mm-hmm.
And we have looked at the possibilities of cleaning the lines, but the only way to pig the lines, you have to go in and disconnect all the people on that line. You put the pig in, finally clean it out, but you also have to put blow-offs, and all of that is very expensive. So there's so many things to look at on one of these systems that is there.
Yeah.
Now, I did get into Southern Trace on the well number 5 as a possibility because of the decreases And after the survey's done, you have to go find the septic tank permits, see where the septic tank lines are, and look and see if you can fit a 50-foot radius in. And I found that on well 5, we will have to displace septic tank drain lines on people's developed lots. And after seeing the problems that we had with well 4, getting that easement with the various complaints, and actually I was ordered off someone's land to be able to see anybody there. So I'm down, and I just went out to well number 6, which we can put in originally. Mr. Stafford, our KRJ, hired a dowser, which I saw one 40 years ago, I think, but apparently it works, and he identified the well sites. So with that well site at number 6, we can build it. We found that the FEMA, that's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, your federal rate insurance maps have been upgraded, topo's upgraded. So we don't have the problem with being within the noose buffer, or we are within a flood area, but not, your flood channel. So we can fill approximately 3 or 4 feet. My idea with that, we'll go in with compacted fill, build a large platform, and then install the casing, which will be above the flood level. And I think the casing, 6 inches is the minimum. We'll set it up. And I was looking at adding another foot to it. The minimum to be above the defined flood is 1 foot, 2 feet. And I could move it on up to 3. Just, I guess you'd say, because as you saw in Asheville, sometimes weather surprises.
Along those lines, since you just mentioned well number 6, have those plans been submitted for approval?
I've just arranged for the local inspector that handles Wake County for DEQ to go out. We have to show the latitude, longitude, and get them to approve it. And I've done that because we didn't waste time with well number 5 with the problems looking at septic tanks and all that. And in the middle of it, the surveyor that was working had a severe medical problem and was out of work for 2 months, 3 months, I think. I'm not sure, but it's hard to get him back.
Okay. Now, you acknowledge, going back to my question, about the correspondence on September 20th, 2023, you stated that you understand that you're responsible for filing the quarterly reports.
Yeah.
Correct? Yes.
Correct.
And you didn't,
I did not.
because you had other priorities. Is that
Well,
what you're contending?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
And also, I'm 74 years old, and my wife is just a bit younger, and she had her medical problems at the time. And unfortunately, I had to have my right shoulder joint replaced, which it takes your mind off of most everything. I apologize.
I can understand. But were you informed that the quarterly reports were required by a commission order? And that you can't just disregard a commission's order because you have priorities, you put your priorities in other places?
Well, actually, I did not pay that much attention to who ordered it. I know it's required. I mean, if I'm dealing with the state or federal government, the requirements to deal with.
Okay.
But I just that was not a priority at the time, was what I was doing.
Okay. And along those lines, no one, i.e. Mr. Stafford, checked up on you and said, hey, have you filed those quarterly reports?
Yes, and I asked several of them if they could work on them, and I would work on them with them. And, you know, it's one of those of everybody has things to do. Honestly, I detest doing this. I mean, as far as reports, I've been doing it for 50 years.
Now, going back to the well site. After it's evaluated by whoever, DEQ.
Yes.
After that, there's another step, is there not? There are other things that you have to do.
Oh, of course. As I said, after they approve it, we will go in and do the grading work to bring the site up, build a large pad to put the well house on. And then after that is fixed, compacted, we will bring in the well drill. And that right now has become a problem. I think the one that did well too said it would be 6 months before he could get back to do the installation there. And I'm sorry, if you understand, well number 2 is 485 feet deep. So that you're dealing with 5 joints of pipe at 5 times, so 25 joints of galvanized steel pipe have to come up piece by piece, pull the well, and go back in. And it is a real problem for the, I mean, it's a large job to do that. I mean, with well 2, actually well 2 went out, you had some discussion with the low water pressure. I had gone out because Rob said something seemed a little low. It was low pressure. Understand the wells at Southern Trace are connected with 2 hydropneumatic tanks. They're in series. So they're pressure tanks just like you would have in a typical house, but very large. They will maintain the pressure generally. If you're not in a high use condition, everything's fine. I went down to take a look at it. While I was there, we blew the circuit out on well 2 as the pump went out. So I happened to be there when that occurred and was quite surprised. It took a pool, I forget, about a week to get the pump in, but we went through, set the pump curves and everything there. So that worked. And at the same time, we noticed that well 1 had decreased a little bit of yield. So we had the casing cleaned on that. That was taken after well 2 went in, we took it down. And I've just gone back looking at the flow values, and surprisingly, some of the wells were producing, based upon the meter, more than we had estimated. The way well capacity is calculated, you look at the pumping depth of the well, the pumping rate, and you maintain it a 24-hour drawdown. So you draw it down to where it's a level, and you say, well, it's 31 gallons per minute right there. Well, when you get it into the system, sometimes your pumps have a little bit higher efficiency and can move the water out. And you're not going to do the 24-hour drawdown on the well unless there's a very serious problem. Normally, and I think the state requirement is that your well capacity has to be adequate to provide the flows in a 12-hour period. So basically, you don't want to pump.
Okay, let me go back to a statement just to clarify. You said that you were told that the pressure dropped. Were you, the water pressure dropped in an area? Were you talking about April this year?
I mean, it was a small drop when we lost well up 2, but you're looking at, well,
No, I'm talking about this year, 2020. April of 2024.
that's
what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, there was no outage. That was the term that I heard, but with hydropneumatic tanks, you're not going to have that because as the pressure within the tanks decrease, the water that the customer flows through the faucet decreases. So generally they're going to have water, I mean, until it gets down, with a total failure. Which can happen if you have a major electrical outage throughout the area. Then there's a possibility, 2 days.
It was 2 days?
I said, if your electrical outage is 2 days, then I would expect you to get down to where people are out of water.
Right.
That's when we bring in a portable generator and hook it up so that we can get it delivered.
So when you Could a home in a, high elevation, system, lose service if the pressure was that low?
Well, we set that to provide, if I remember correctly, I think 60 PSI on the second floor of the highest house is where we're targeting the pressure. That's very high pressure down in the low areas of the system.
But did you receive, complaints from customers?
No,
You
I
said,
didn't receive complaints from Rob when we were looking at well two. We went over to look at well one and started looking at the gauge, and well, he said it's normally at, I can't remember what the pressure was, but it was down a couple of PSI. I mean, it was nothing significant, but we did note it. I mean, it's not something that I would be excited about.
okay, so this is something that you noted during your inspection of the system.
Yeah, it just happened that I was there for well two to shoot an arc out of the breaker box, and we found that the pump was locked up, so.
Okay.
Well one, we determined after well two that, let's take a look at it. And I forget, what was that, May, 1st of May? I guess. That was handled by KRJ. I didn't get involved. They got the well contract.
Ms. Johnson, in the cumulative report that was filed November 12th, 2024, and I believe you signed this report, correct?
When was that?
No,
November 12th.
yes,
Yes, ma'am.
yes.
Yes.
Now you state that, and you mentioned a few minutes ago that you think the best option to remedy the radium issue in well one is to blend.
That's correct.
Now, have you consulted with DEQ regarding whether this is a viable solution?
Well, they had discussed that with me, and I said I would run through the numbers and see how that would work. So I haven't made a formal submittal to them. Well, simply because I was working with this.
Okay, so they haven't come back to you with their thoughts on that
No, but
alternative.
my reading of the requirements are it's based upon the consumers, what they see, rather than what they see coming from well one. It's what they see coming from their faucet. And our well one is about a third roughly. So if the limit's 15 and it's running 15, then blended is going to be 5. And the fortunate thing, well one is there at the 2 tanks. So all the water of the system comes next to well one, and it's blended at that point. If well one was in a separate part of the system from the tanks, then you would have the concentrated water from well one flowing to some customers.
Mhm.
So this is just a look that there's the problem, but we also see that a solution could be had with the tanks.
What if DEQ doesn't allow mixing to resolve the MCL violation?
Well, generally, we look at what's put out at the water plants. I mean, I've worked with large cities, towns over North Carolina with OSA associates for many years, and that's what we measured is what we delivered to the customer. So I'm not sure how a single well is regulated if it's mixed. I don't know.
Would you be modifying the entry point?
No, it is piped, and it was around 1990, a regulation went into effect on tanks where you had to ensure that you had no short circuiting, where your water coming in could not go directly to the consumer. It had to have some mixing ability. And on those tanks, they were done that way. Actually, there are a couple of check valves there so that we can get the full system flow into the entry tank for well one. So it ends up going tank two to tank one and out from there.
Can you confirm, however, that none of these plans have been submitted to DEQ for approval?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
No questions.
All right, let's see. Mr. Johnson, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the current capacities of 1, 2, and 3. So I think I understood your testimony to be that at present, the capacity of 2 is 35 gallons per minute. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that is the best number that I'm using here. But I went back and, got Dennis to send me, the records for each well. And I just started going through them yesterday evening, and it appears that well two is even higher, and well three, I've got to go back and question our metering on it because it appears much higher than I would anticipate. Well three was what we looked at as the little well that finally gave us the capacity that, we had to have. And it looks like it may actually be higher. There are so many variables. Well, I don't know. Well, I told you the well's 485 feet deep. The land is 315, so we're down, what is that, 150 feet below sea level? Pretty much where that water's coming from. The strata there is not something you can understand. The state geological map just shows various collections. They're metamorphic. Of course they are, because the old rock is where your radiological material comes in. I mean, the radon is the byproduct of the deterioration of your uranium. And I don't know, years ago, maybe the 70s, late 70s, where we had the radon scares in everybody's basement. It was kind of an interesting thing, but we cannot predict what the strata are out there. I tried to correlate where the well driller goes in. They define that 112, they've hit a water bearing strata. And then they go down to 150 and proclaim we have another water bearing strata. And that's where we put the well screens in to capture that water and not bring in the fines. And it's just a guess at where it's going to be. I could not correlate using elevations that the strata on one well, which is only a fifth of a mile away, is much different than the other, it appears. So it could be tilted geology, but there's not that much. I talked with the state geologist office and said there just hasn't been a lot of work there, as opposed to the Deep River where everybody went pretty wild over the coal and possibility of fracking that area.
Mhm.
There's a lot of drilling there.
all right, so I just want to make sure that I understand, the best information we have about the pumping capacities right now. So for well one, where are we?
Well, one, that is at 35.
Okay, and then so well two, we're at 35,
Well two is at 35.
and well three, we are still at 20?
Well three is at 20. And
Okay.
as I said, I went back and started looking at the pumping records and I'm saying, my gosh, something doesn't make sense. So I want to reevaluate that one.
Okay,
But, I think well three is actually higher.
okay. So we're at 90 right now, if you, total
Well,
capacity.
You get 90 subtotal, and yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And the design standard is 106?
No, actually,
again?
that was, just looking at the total.
Oh, no, that's,
Let's see, the required capacity, I just put down my incorrect number of 106 to calculate and show that we have, even with my bad number, 152,000 gallons versus the 76,800 that's required. That's using the 400 gallons per day per residents and dividing that into equal amounts.
Okay, but we've heard discussion today about the regulatory standard or the design standard being 107 gallons per minute. I understand you've done a calculation looking at gallons per day, but if the regulatory standard is 107, we're below that at 90, are we not?
Well, no, we use the 24-hour, this is assumed the 24-hour pumping capacity, and using 106, that would be down below where I have U yield and percent of total. It required well capacity. The gallons per minute at 106, which is a low number, 121 is where it is, that would yield 152,640 gallons per day. And for 192 lots at 400 gallons per day, the requirement is 76,800.
Okay, so is it your testimony then that these 3 wells, as they're in service, are the capacity is sufficient to meet the regulatory standard?
They are.
Okay. And you,
Well number 4 was done because.
no, I'm not talking about with well number 4 though.
But I'm saying the reason well number 4 exists is they had the sudden decline of well number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And with that type of drastic decline, you would like to look for additional sources in case that happens, because there's a subdivision adjacent to Southern Trace that I visited when Southern Trace started. That was what, 96, I believe, 95. And they had a well, and I'll never forget, the lady that ran the system said, yes, we have, I think it was 150 gallons per minute. We call the well Big Bertha, And I said, boy, we're in good shape with water. And we got good water from well 2, not as much as, well 1, not as much as we'd like, but it is not predictable as what's gonna happen. Their yields have dropped down. I think that one big well of theirs is down around 50 gallons per minute. And they were successful in getting access to well sites. What's it, Swift Creek? I can't remember the name of the creek that's down at the bottom of the hill. They've actually gone into that area and got access to the wells there.
So if we're at sufficient capacity with these 3, I understand why, I think your testimony is that well 4 has been drilled because of the sudden decline that was experienced, the decline that's been experienced with respect to well 2, then why well 6?
Well, the dowser has been there, we found it, and if nothing else, I'm gonna get the site approved while, we can have that. So if something happens, it's unusual for me to see a well system go through a decline like this. And if I'm dealing with a water plant that has a reservoir, you want to have a standby generator, you want to have dual pumping capacity, et cetera. And that's my concern here is, as long as we're getting the information prepared to look toward the future, why not have a plan in place? Because I've seen, it is impossible for people not to really begrudge you from coming in and trying to put a well radius that's going to restrict the use of their lot. I've never encountered this. Most of my work has been with municipal systems where we go out and say, hey, let's condemn that. But you can't do that as a private industry.
Okay. So I understand your testimony in response to a question from the public staff is that there's going to be an on-site inspection performed by DEQ for well 6.
Well, 6
next week.
They've scheduled that for Tuesday.
Okay. And where are we with well 4?
Well, 4, I have the plans prepared and I can send the permit application on over to send it in.
But you haven't submitted it to DEQ
I
at this
have
point?
not.
Okay.
I've not put the application together.
Okay.
But it's a simple application and submittal. And for a dollar check or something, I can't recall.
Okay. All right. Additional questions from commissioners? Let's see. Commissioner Hughes?
Have you looked into, as an option, if some of these other things don't move forward? Connecting to the city of Raleigh water system, is that in close enough proximity to be economical?
Oh, we're just down the road from the new water, well, called the new water plant, the plant there on NC 50 of Raleigh's. But Raleigh has forbidden interconnections, haven't
They're not jumped up and down together.
Let's see. We need you to answer the question. To the extent that you cannot answer the question, you can say that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the question for you is, in your employee with
Right.
KRJ, have you investigated the possibility of interconnection to the city of Raleigh's water system?
That's, is it 4 miles? I'm not familiar with the distance. I drove by it just last week, but it's, that much water main is gonna be tremendously more expensive than doing wells. Unless we have to go out and buy a plot of land somewhere, it's a little bit of a dilemma.
Okay, and just a follow-up question. I think that there's an adjacent subdivision that might be much closer. Have you looked into potentially connecting or having, some kind of emergency connection to that?
That's Turner Farms. Well, when we designed Southern Trace back in the 90s, we did extend the water line up to their property line, with some discussion of them to have an interconnection if it was necessary. But it never had been necessary, and then both yields had dropped in their wells and this well, and everybody's trying to satisfy the requirements for their system rather than trying to interconnect.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
All right, Mr. Johnson, just one more before I turn it over to Commissioner Kimmerite. But what is your understanding of DEQ's position on the regulatory status of the water system at Southern Trace? Is it in compliance with all applicable regulations?
Well, except for the reporting, what I'm seeing, it is in compliance.
Well, what reporting?
The reporting of the quarterlies,
Well, that's a commission obligation. I'm talking about Division of Environmental Quality
Oh, okay.
oversight.
I thought that was their requirement too. But, I'm not aware of them having any particular problem other than, wanting to know what we're going to be doing in satisfaction of the radiological problem.
So they're not concerned about pumping capacity.
No. But not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I mean, I had the discussions that we were going to do the well, but I didn't hear that it had to be done by such and such date.
Okay. Commissioner Kimmerite.
Mr. Johnson, I just have one question that I'm going to just be real clear about. I want to make sure that the record is clear about this because from your testimony, I wasn't fully understanding the answer. So if you can turn to your November 12, 2024 report. And what I want to understand is whether the wells number 1, 2, and 3, as they are currently operating, are in compliance with the requirements. And on page 1, the second to last paragraph states that the NCAC required minimum yield for the 192 lots is 107 gallons per minute. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then as we talked, you provided information to Chair Mitchell about the current yield for wells 1, 2, and 3. And through your testimony, I think an error was corrected on page 3 of the report.
That's correct.
But the current yield, as with the correction, is 90 gallons per minute. Is that correct for the current wells 1, 2, and 3?
That's correct.
So my understanding then is that wells 1, 2, and 3, without the addition of well number 4, does not meet the requirements.
Well, it does. Hold on. Well, let me calculate it. That 90 gallons per minute would be, gosh. I'm sorry, I can't do math. I'm sorry, I really need a calculator to run numbers like this. Can I give you a response after I get a calculator?
Okay. I think that I would just request a late filed exhibit of the calculation of whether the existing wells 1, 2, and 3 meet the requirements.
With a citation to the applicable requirement.
Well, okay, the requirement is 400 gallons per day. And that would 400 gallons per day per house, which takes us to 76,800. The gallons per day provided would be the 90 gallons per minute times 24 hours.
So, Mr. Allen, just to confirm that we will request a late filed exhibit with a citation.
Late filing exhibit, showing the calculation and the requirement.
Cite to the applicable standard. All right. Anything else, Commissioner Hughes? All right, let's go to questions on commissioners' questions. We'll start over here.
Mr. Johnson, are you sure that the design standard is pumping 24 hours per day versus 12 hours per day?
The standard is 400 gallons per day. Then there is a requirement in there that says you must pump it within all your capacity requirements for your housing. 12 hours is the maximum pumping time. Well, that appears to be a requirement after you are in operation, because if you're designing for 400 gallons per day, then come back and say, but you got to do it 12 hours. Then you're saying it's 800 gallons per day per unit, which that doesn't make sense. So my understanding is the 12-hour requirement it's in your permit requirement. But my understanding is that is a restriction on your pumps, that you should not be required to pump more than 12 hours per day.
Subject to check, wouldn't the calculation be 90 gallons times 60 minutes times 12?
90 gallons times 60, well, it would be times 24 to meet the 400 requirement. Now,
Isn't this the late file exhibit?
12 hours.
yeah, I mean, if it's into the operational things or permitting thing. The permitting is 400 gallons per day per lot, and that's 24 hours.
Okay.
But that, if you have the ordinance, I mean, the state requirement is permit application. And after the signature, it's in there that your pumping time should not exceed 12 hours.
Well, would you accept, subject to check, that North Carolina Administrative Code, Section 15A, 18C .0402, subsection G3
I have no
states
idea.
that you're not familiar with it?
If you show it to me, I might recognize it.
Chair Mitchell, I move that the commission take judicial notice of Section 15A of the North Carolina Administrative Code, 18C .0402, subsection G3, which states the combined yield of all wells of a public water system shall provide in 12 hours pumping time, in 12 hours pumping time, the daily flow requirements as determined in Rule .0409 of this section. And is it not true that the .0409 correlates to 400 gallons per day?
Okay. So I'm sorry, I just read the thing in the permit application and saw the 12 hours.
Okay.
So it,
All right, well, here's what we're gonna do. We've got the request for the late filed exhibit. I also want the request, I'm gonna make a request for, any correspondence from the Division of Environmental Quality to KRJ related to the pumping capacity of well number 2. And that includes any, notices of violation or any other, written communication from DEQ.
Related to pumping capacity.
Correct. In addition, to the extent there's been any written communication from DEQ related to the capacity, the quality at well 1, I'd like to see that.
Okay.
Okay,
Excuse me, Chair Mitchell, the public staff would like the opportunity to also provide its calculation.
okay, here's what we're gonna do. When all right. Public staff can file as a late filed exhibit its calculation.
Thank you.
All right, does the public staff have any additional questions for the witness?
No additional questions. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, any redirect for the witness?
Just briefly,
Okay.
Chair Mitchell. Mr. Johnson, you were asked a question from Chair Mitchell about whether or not you filed the application for well number 4.
that's correct.
And you have not filed that yet.
No, we have not.
How quickly can you get that permit application filed?
Today.
Okay. And can you expedite that to get it done as a priority?
Yeah, I mean, the plans have been done, and it's a simple set of plans. We're going back and basically we're connecting one well into the other system. We are changing out some meters, et cetera, but nothing significant.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, and actually that wasn't redirect for purposes of the record. That was just questions on commission's questions, Kayleen. Okay, Mr. Johnson, you may step down.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are going to hold the record open to receive the late filed exhibits that have been requested today. And I'm going to ask for I'm going to ask for post-hearing submittals here. If you could, 30, get them in as soon as possible, but no later than 30 days after the transcript is available to you all. And I'd ask for those late filed exhibits to come in as soon as possible. I'd like them as early next week as you can get them. And is today, well, I was going to say today, but I'll give you till next week. Okay. Anything from council before we adjourn?
No.
No.
Okay, with that, we will be adjourned, holding the record open for these late fall exhibits. Thank you.